I bought talking buttons for my cat, but the cat wasn't the only one who used them. Written by Let's Split Up. It's actually my youngest son's cat who learned how to use the buttons. I inherited the cat after my son lost control of his car on the icy roads last winter. It happened on the day he received a scholarship to his top college choice. He and his boyfriend were feeling on top of the world and were on their way back home from a trip. His boyfriend survived. He did not. You cannot imagine the grief. Either you have experienced the loss of a child or you haven't. I did not weep, not at the funeral nor for many weeks after. I became a stone, an object. It was as if all the sorrow were locked far from reach. Instead of feeling anything, I simply thought many times of retrieving the pistol that I own from its case in the back of my closet. And on a few occasions, I even went and took it and sat with it, feeling its weight in my hand. My son Vinny to his friends, was my world. One day, he would have been famous, I'm sure of it. You may think that is a father's pride talking, maybe it is, but he had a music scholarship. He would have performed for presidents and world leaders. In my mind, when I see him, it is usually at his piano, playing for his cat. When he was 15, I promised him a kitten if he did well in school. And he picked out this tabby, the tiniest and angriest tabby in the world, and named her Terry. She loved only him and hissed and growled at anyone else who came near, including me. She also peed on his clothes and on mine and on my bed. To say I wanted to get rid of Terrible Terry, as I called her, is an understatement. But then, my brilliant son died. And suddenly, it was just me and Terrible Terry and the gun. I felt nothing but resentment toward the cat. But she spent hours and hours slouched on the windowsill in his bedroom where she always sat while he played piano. I used to think she sat there to watch the birds and couldn't care less about his playing. Now she didn't even lift her head. She just loafed on the sill, as if waiting for him to come bursting in and pull the dust cover off and play. And there were the buttons. You've seen them, I'm sure. Those gimmicky buttons that people get to train their animals to talk. Bunch of nonsense if you ask me. What has a dog got to say? Nothing but food, probably. And anyway, people are supposed to give commands to dogs, not the other way around. But Vinny would watch all these videos of dogs and sometimes cats pressing the buttons, even though, to be honest, the cat videos he showed me looked like the cats walking onto the buttons completely by accident. And that's what I told him. Complete waste of money. People wishfully projecting their ideas onto their pets. The cat pressed "love you" and meant it? Ha! Cats only know hunger and selfish desires. Well, my stubborn, dreamy-eyed cat-loving son bought a set of those buttons. He pre-recorded dozens of them, but he began with just a handful. Food, cuddle, outside, music, dad, and Vinny. Yeah, he put me and himself as buttons, and music too, because he was convinced in his silly teenaged way that the cat liked his music and might want to request it. Terry was terrified of those buttons. No matter how he tried to train her, she refused to use them. She hissed, she swatted, she wouldn't go near them. She knew exactly what they were there for, I'm sure of it. She even knew the words because he'd say to her, "Let's have some music," and she would go to her perch by the piano and wait for him. But when it came to the buttons, she refused. Terry loved those buttons about as much as I loved Terry. But then, like I said, came the incident. Suddenly, my son was gone. The house felt wrong, empty. Terry was a husk. I put food out, but she didn't eat. I didn't know how to read her signals. She hissed at me if I came near. I decided I should get rid of her. I couldn't keep this cat. The cat hated me anyway. I will get rid of her, I thought. And then I will be done with me too. But I couldn't bring myself to get rid of my son's cat. And I couldn't commit S-word while my cat was still alive. And so we were stuck. Me and the cat. And then one night I was up in my room contemplating S-word when I heard the recorded voice downstairs speak, Vinny. I assumed it must be a mistake. She must have walked over the button, but then it came again. Vinny, Vinny, Vinny. I stood there, listening to that cat press Vinny over and over again, and tears came into my eyes. It was like a key turning in a lock, a crack in the dam that then finally burst. I gasped, loud, gulping sobs. Finally, the tears came from my son. And when the flood was over, I came down and found tiny Terry sitting by the buttons, looking miserable. And I scooped her up and told her I miss him too. And for once, she didn't swat me. She gave only the smallest growl. I put her down and got her some food. Got myself some too. We both ate. That was the beginning. Since then, I've added more buttons. You see, I'm not an animal person. I didn't understand Terry's body language, her wants and needs, without the buttons. She finally started using them, training me. I guess they say cats do that. She has a wet food button, a kibble button. She has a no button to use if I show her the wrong food. I also added from my son's collection the love you button. Yes, I confess, I did add it. And a Terry button. And I began to make a habit of pressing love you, Vinny, and love you, Terry. I was genuinely in shock how much she communicated. The first time she pressed Dad, love you, I almost broke down all over. I couldn't believe it. She looked like she wasn't even trying. She just casually walked over the buttons, but it was deliberate. It happened more than once. I still hadn't learned to read her cat body language at all. But with the buttons, I understood her, and I felt like I had a part of my son with me. Sometimes, she said things that just cracked open my soul, like when she looked at me with those big round eyes one time and hit Vinny home. I wish he was home too, I told her. It was uncanny. The things we could discuss. We'd have entire conversations. I know it sounds nuts. I'd have thought myself nuts just a couple of months before, but I added buttons so fast and she took to all of them. I asked her once if she understands what happened to Vinny. She replied with Vinny bye-bye. I'd added the bye-bye button to tell her whenever I was leaving the house. Then she asked me, Vinny home. I had to tell her no. Vinny bye-bye. And she stubbornly insisted again. Vinny home. And she walked away angry, I think, that I couldn't make Vinny come back. But the reason I am sharing this story and sharing this story here is because of what happened last week. Last week, my son Liam came to see me. Liam is Vinny's older half-brother. He's nearly a decade older than Vin from a previous relationship, and unfortunately, Liam inherited all of his mother's worst traits. It is always the same with him. He begs for money, gets abusive if I do not give it, and disappears once I have made him a loan he will never repay. I cut off all funds to him a few years ago and told him I would no longer enable his habits. While I'd never cut him entirely out of my life, I hadn't allowed him to visit when Vinny was alive because of the way he'd treat Vinny on a previous visit, when he'd sneeringly accused me of favoring that menacing little, I won't repeat his hateful words, for his younger brother. When he showed up on my doorstep, he had the smell of whiskey on his breath, and he looked wild-eyed and anxious. "Dad," he said, and then hugged me tight. "I'm sorry about Vin." It shocked me so much, I hugged him right back. And he came in and sat down and asked how I was doing. He was surprisingly solicitous. I didn't understand why. His usual meanness didn't come through at all until he noticed a growling Terry. "You still have that little piss queen?" he asked, and reached a hand for her, only for her to swat and run away. "Little shit," he said. "Her name is Terry," I said defensively. He laughed. "Didn't you used to call her Terrible Terry?" She doesn't pee on things anymore. From the button area came presses of bye-bye. "She wants you to go bye-bye," I said. "She can fuck off. She's not your son, I am." "Bye-bye." I didn't like the way he talked to the cat. Though a few minutes later, after she peed on his shoes, I found his anger more understandable, and I locked her up to prevent him from harming her. But he seemed genuinely sad about Vinny, and even asked about Vinny's boyfriend and his recovery after the crash. I wondered if he had to come over to try to patch things up between us. Maybe to start off on better footing, like me and Terry had, until he asked me what was going to happen to Vinny's college fund. "I haven't decided yet," I told him. "I'm still processing all of this." "But he's not going to use it, right? I mean, even before the accident, the money you'd been saving for him, he had a scholarship, right? He wasn't going to need it, and he definitely won't need it now, Dad. I could use a loan." "Liam, you still have one son left, Dad." He burst, and there was the old rage. "Why do you always treat me like this? Even when he's dead, he still deserves more than I do. I bet you cut me out of your will too, huh?" "I did not." "You didn't?" "No. You both get equal shares." "Oh, okay. He calmed down. "Sorry, I have a lot of resentment, I guess. I'm sorry, but about the loan, is there any way?" "I will have to think on it." Okay. You think I'll make us drinks, okay?" I should have known what was happening when he went into the kitchen and was fumbling around longer than necessary. I should have known, but how could I? I had already lost one son. How could I suspect the other? How could I imagine the worst? I wanted to believe things would be better. I drank the alcohol he put in front of me without thinking. I assumed the wooziness was just the booze. It had been a long enough time since I'd had a real drink. Somewhere in the bedroom where she was locked up, Terry was howling her little heart out. I'd never heard her make those sounds and said I was going to let her out, but when I got up, the whole world lurched. Liam's arms caught me and he said, "Got you, Dad," and then kept whispering in my ear, his breath still reeking. Sorry, but you're making me do this. If you just give me that fucking loan." I didn't start to panic, really panic, until he propped me up on the sofa and went upstairs with the question, "You still keep your gun in the closet?" The fear hit me in a wave then. I felt like I was floating, like I was drifting away from my body, like I was lost in some strange and horrible dream. I tried to stand, to stumble to the table and grab my phone, but I fell and heard the crack of my head against the table's edge. The ground came up to meet me. Pain shot through my skull. Footsteps thudded overhead, cursing as he rifled through my closet. I tried to pull myself up again, finally managed to grab my phone. The scream swam in my vision. My fingers were fat and clumsy as I tried to push the keys to call for help. A hand smacked the phone out of my grip. "It's 'cause you won't help me," Liam rambled as he again wrapped his arms around me to try to get me onto the sofa. "Everyone knows you're depressed. Can't handle Vinny's death. You should have just done it, man. If you'd just done it, I wouldn't have to." "Puh," I gasped. "This is the only way. This is how it was gonna be anyway. You don't even want to live anyway. In your own way, you're helping me out here in the end," he said. And then, in response to the howling from the other room, he suddenly shrieked, "Shut the fuck up!" The howling stopped. Liam glared toward the door, his breaths coming hard and fast, then looked back at me. Everything had become so blurry. His words were a garble, his features a haze. I felt the cold muzzle of the gun as my heart galloped in my chest. From Vinny's room came a sharp rustle, like a curtain or a sheet. And then the piano, the notes of a piano. "The hell?" Liam's voice slurred through my drugged haze. Is someone here?" The playing continued, unsteady but beautiful, unmistakably Clair de Lune, just like Vinny had always played, but slower, halting. And I wondered, it couldn't be the cat, could it? It almost sounded like the cat walking deliberately across the keys, the same way she walked across the buttons, but that would have been impossible. "Who's there?" snarled Liam. Was all I could manage. He snatched up the gun and stalked toward the bedroom door. In my blurry vision, he wavered back and forth, and when he opened the door, there, at the piano, was a figure, flickering and impossible. A figure that both was and was not there. And Liam screamed and raised his arm, and the world exploded as the gun went off. And then there was the howling of the cat, and the cat came charging out, all bristling like a tiger, and with her that same figure from the piano. And Liam was screaming in terror and fired the gun again and ran out the door. What I remember next is waking in the ER. Neighbors apparently called police after hearing the gunshots. When I was discharged and returned home, my head wrapped from the concussion, I was relieved to find Terry whole and alive. She hurried over to greet me, tail up. I'd finally started picking up her body language to know a greeting when I saw it. But it wasn't just the tabby greeting me I knew. You see, I'd finally realized something. A cat can't play a piano, and this cat couldn't use buttons. Not of her own volition. Maybe it hadn't been Terry talking to me all along. Maybe it was, and always had been, Vinny. And so, as I extended my hand and Terry rubbed my knuckles, I told her, "I love you. I won't ever leave you. I promise. I will survive. You can be free. I love you." Terry rubbed my hand again, and rubbed my face when I bent my head to theirs. Then she patted over to the buttons and walked across them. And I listened to my son's recorded voice. "Love you. Love you. Bye-bye." Terry hasn't touched those buttons since. But every once in a while, when I'm very deep in dreams, I think I hear the sound of the piano. I found a weird house-sitting ad. It might be the best gig I'll ever get. Written by Sapphire Lion 15. It seemed like easy money. Wanted. Weekend house sitter. 3 days, 2 nights, will pay for food, $500 a day. Call Agatha. I should have been more suspicious. But at the time, I was fresh out of college, up to my ears in debt, and barely managing to pay rent every month. I'd been looking for steady work, basically anything that would let me get groceries without filing for bankruptcy. When I saw the ad stapled to a tree on one of the city streets, I'd house sat for friends and relatives before, and the flyer didn't mention anything about pet sitting, babysitting, or anything like that. Plus, the pay would cover next month's rent, and if I did a good job, I might be able to make the gig the regular thing. I called the number, thinking there was no harm in at least making sure the offer was legit. Agatha turned out to be an older woman who answered on the second ring. She understood that the ad seemed too good to be true and told me that she could prove the offer was valid, giving me an address to look up and her full name to Google. I put her on speaker and did so. As it turned out, Agatha had been a pretty big deal 10 years before. She'd been a fashion critic who was well known for her refined tastes and almost supernaturally good predictions about what would be in every season. Upon retiring, she turned into something of a hermit and almost never leaving her house, though the fact that delivery people regularly showed up at her front door proved she was still alive. And she was loaded. Born into a high-class family, she had more money in the bank than some small countries had in their treasuries. While this would be specifically for the weekend, Agatha continued after my Google search, I have a series of trips coming up that I simply cannot put off. If this weekend goes well, I may hire you back for a following weekend for double the current rate. My jaw dropped. I could be making $3,000 in a weekend? At the time, I thought she was either extremely generous or didn't know the value of a dollar. Looking back, I probably should have seen that as a red flag. But I was desperate, so naturally, I accepted the job. I was to arrive on Friday morning, specifically at 10 o'clock sharp. Once I'd stepped through the front door, I wasn't allowed to leave the house again until Sunday afternoon, when Agatha would return. Thus, I was expected to bring everything I would possibly need for my 3-day stay. Odd as I thought that was, I was not about to tick off the lady who could single-handedly end a few of my money troubles. Agatha's house was an absolutely gorgeous mansion. It practically screamed old money. It was 3 stories tall, painted a pristine white, a balcony overlooked the front lawn. The lawn and flower beds were immaculately cared for. A golden statue made up of numerous brass instruments stood proud at the center of the garden. All in all, I was starting to think this gig would be worth it. But I had to pause when I saw the dolls. Standing on poles guarding either side of the porch were 2 gigantic dolls. They looked like they were made of some kind of sackcloth, as their skin reminded me of burlap. Both of them were about 6 feet tall, though the poles they were attached to made them seem at least a foot taller. They didn't have mouths, but there were 2 massive black circles embroidered onto their faces to act like eyes. They had stringy black yarn to act as their hair, though how said yarn hadn't rotted away due to exposure to the elements was anyone's guess. They were made up to resemble a man and a woman. The male doll's yarn hair was made up to look like a mop-top haircut, and he was dressed in a black Victorian-style suit. The female doll was wearing a ballet-style dress with black leggings, and her yarn hair was tied up into a sloppy bun. Both had a very Burton-esque feel to them. As surprised as I was to see the dolls, especially because of how out of place they were, I shrugged and played it off as a weird interest Agatha had. After all, she'd hardly be the first rich person to have an eccentric hobby. Agatha all but pulled me inside when I knocked on the door. She was a sharply dressed woman in at least her late 60s. I noticed that a suitcase was sitting behind her. She looked satisfied to see that I had arrived on time and had a suitcase and duffel with me. "Got everything you'll need?" she asked in lieu of a greeting. "Everything I'll need," I reassured her. Good, very now. On to my taxi here." I looked out the still open front door to see a taxi pull up right beside my beat-up Prius. "I'll pay you what you're owed as soon as I get back," she told me as she picked up her suitcase. "I don't have time to go over everything, so I left a list of rules for you on the kitchen table. Follow it to the letter, and everything will be fine. See you Sunday." With that, she went out the door, shutting it behind her. I blinked, wondering if that was normal behavior to someone leaving their clearly expensive house to a total stranger. Setting my bags down in the foyer, I walked through the gargantuan house until I found the kitchen. As she had promised, a list had been written down. It was written on custom stationery and left next to a sticky note that read, Please follow all rules. I dutifully read over the list. Some of the instructions were rather self-explanatory, but others were just plain weird. Number 1. Please feed the goldfish in the library. The food is in a jar on the cabinet next to the tank. Just 1 pinch a day. Number 2. Every night at 9 o'clock sharp, you must be in the living room, staring out the picture window. You must watch everything they do. Do not look away. They like an audience. When they bow to you, clap 3 times and close the curtains. Be sure to open them again in the morning. Number 3. Please don't smoke or vape in the house. If you must, please only smoke or vape on the balcony. Number 4. If you touch any books in the library, please put them back where you found them. Number 5. If you are injured or feel sick, sleep on the couch on the back patio. Be there by 9, and you'll feel better by the morning. Number 6. On Saturday night, leave a paper plate of frozen crinkle-cut carrot slices on the welcome mat. Be sure you do this by 6 o'clock at the latest. Don't worry about getting the paper plate. They never leave leftovers. Number 7. Ross, the gardener, comes on Saturday morning. Jeb, the special gardener, comes every Saturday evening. Do not speak to either of them, and do not let Jeb know I'm not home. Number 8. Do not make any noise while watching them. They will excuse a sneeze or coughing fit, but everything else will make them unhappy. And finally, number 9. The streaming service is yours to use as you like. If you order any pizza or food for delivery, leave a note telling me where it was at and what it cost, and I will cover it. Help yourself to anything in the fridge. The rules about feeding the fish, not smoking, and picking up after myself were easy to understand and follow. Fish were easy to please, and I had never been a smoker, but the other rules were weird. Still, like I said, they were all pretty easy to follow, and Agatha was being more than generous. I decided to just grin and bear it, though I have to admit that the constant mentions of they left me with a knot in my stomach. Friday was spent exploring the house and finding all the rooms listed. The library was on the 2nd floor, right next to my guest room, which looked like a luxury hotel suite. The back patio was a fully covered and furnished deck, with glass doors and windows keeping Mother Nature out and a connected heating and AC unit keeping it comfortable. The living room was a surprisingly big room. You could have parked a car in there and still had room for 10 people. The picture window mentioned in the list was so big it took up most of the wall, and was framed by red velvet curtains, which greatly reminded me of the curtains used in theaters. After a dinner of ordered pizza and a Mountain Dew, I saw that it was 10 till 9. Too curious to disobey, I went into the living room and looked out the picture window. The sun had set by that point, with the porch light and various lights in the garden illuminating the front. Then at 9 on the dot, just when I was starting to wonder what the big deal was, it happened. The 2 dolls I'd seen earlier jumped off of their posts. There was no warning. One moment they were still and lifeless, and the next they were moving like it was the most normal thing in the world. The male doll offered its arm to the female one, who took it delicately. They walked over onto a bare patch of grass, one right in my line of sight. The male doll touched the statue of the orchestra I'd seen earlier. Eerie, unearthly music filled the air. Then, as I watched, they began to dance. It wasn't a waltz or a salsa or any kind of dance I had seen before, but it was undeniably dancing. They stepped in time to the music, never looking away from one another. At times, the male doll would dip or whirl the female doll around before they began slow dancing once again. My heart hammered as I struggled to rationalize what I was seeing. My eyes were frozen on the pair. Finally, the music tapered off. The dolls stopped their dance and turned to face me. They'd known I was there all along. I was as still as a statue as their black, unreadable eyes focused on me. Then, perfectly in sync, they bowed at me. Remembering the rules, I gave 3 loud claps and closed the curtains as quickly as possible. Then I got out of that room as fast as I could. I made a break for my guest room, avoiding all windows. What if they were still watching the house? And taking these steps 2 at a time. I slammed the door when I got into my room, breathing heavily. Like a scared little kid, I darted under the bed, shaking. How in the name of sanity had that just happened? Did Agatha know it would happen? I had just pulled out my phone in my pocket, wondering what I should do when it buzzed. It was a text from Agatha. I know you must be frightened, but don't be. They only want an audience, nothing more. Just follow the rules and you'll be safe. I sent her a few texts, most of them asking or really begging for answers, but she never replied. I spent most of my night under the blanket in my guest room, hugging my plush sea turtle and not daring to look out the window, lest I see one of the dolls staring at me. Morning eventually came. Exhausted from a fearful, sleepless night, I trudged down the stairs to make some coffee. I froze when I heard someone moving outside, until I remembered the list. One of the gardeners always came Saturday mornings, and I wasn't supposed to speak to them. Tempted as I was to see anyone real, to try and convince myself I wasn't crazy, I decided to abide by the rules, which meant I had to open those living room curtains. I held my breath as I pulled them apart, and wasn't quite sure how I felt when I saw that the dolls were back on their poles, like nothing had ever happened. I had a bowl of cornflakes and a cup of very strong coffee for breakfast, deciding to try and binge comfort films until I could convince myself it had all been some wild dream. Unfortunately, that plan was dashed when, while walking back to the TV room, I tripped on my own discarded sneaker. While my landing was painful, it was nothing compared to the sprained ankle I got in the process. I bit my arm to keep from screaming and managed to hobble back into the kitchen for some ice. I wound up still going on a movie binge, but now it was because I was confined to the couch. I was wondering how I was going to get up the stairs that night if my foot was a mess until I remembered, according to Agatha, I had to sleep on the back patio if I was hurt, which meant that I wouldn't have to see those creepy dolls. While I still didn't know what was going on, I felt much better thinking that I might have a more normal night. I spent the rest of the day following the instructions as best as I could, leaving the chopped carrots on the welcome mat after the special gardener left. I understood why he was the special gardener when I saw him dusting those freaky dolls. After I had fed the fish, I went about my nighttime routine, made more difficult with the busted ankle. By 8:50, I had gotten myself settled on the back patio. The patio's couch was as soft as a bed, and there were enough pillows for me to feel comfortable even after I used 2 of them to prop up my foot. After taking a blanket from the linen closet, I was ready to get a full night's sleep. I had just closed my eyes, starting to drift off, and then I heard it. That eerie, unearthly music. I pulled the blanket over my face, too afraid to think of doing anything else. As I listened, the music stopped mid-note. I froze, wondering what that meant. For a few minutes, it was dead quiet. Then I heard it. 2 pairs of unnaturally light footsteps. They walked in sync, slowly, as though they weren't in any kind of hurry. And they were walking towards the porch. Terrified tears rolled down my cheeks as I silently begged them not to come near me. The steps started walking onto the deck, and then the door to the back patio opened. My heart was in my mouth as I heard 2 sets of feet approach. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to run, but I couldn't. Not with the blanket was ripped off of me. The female doll was standing right next to my head, holding the blanket in one hand as she stared at me. I was about to let out a scream when her hand dropped the blanket and clamped over my mouth. The other hand settled on my hair. She started rhythmically moving her hand through my hair, like she was petting me. Her eyes never left mine. 2 hands grabbed my bad foot. I shot a glance towards the foot of the couch and saw the male doll holding out my swollen limb, much like the female doll. He was staring right at me. He lifted his hand and snapped, and I lost consciousness. When I woke up, the sun was out. Everything that had happened came back to me in a flash, and I looked down at my injured foot. Only, it wasn't injured anymore. It looked like it had never been hurt. I got off the couch and stood on it to test it. It was perfectly fine. Agatha's text came back to me. They only want an audience, nothing more. Just follow the rules and you'll be safe. I guess part of keeping their audience meant keeping them healthy. Feeling physically better after a night of rest, I waited impatiently for Agatha to come back at 3 that day. When she finally walked through the door that afternoon, she had a resigned look on her face. She dropped her bag on the floor and gave a tired smile. I'll unpack, make us a pot of tea, and explain what I can. That was all the answer I got until she'd unpacked everything and put on her electric kettle. Only when we both had a steaming cup of chamomile in our hands did she start to explain. I don't know where they truly came from, she began, or even what they truly are. But when I turned 50, my health began to deteriorate. And with my wealth, I was a prime target for thieves or home intruders. Jeb's brother reached out to me shortly after my 50th birthday. He claimed that he had a way of making sure I was always healthy and protected. All I had to do was give them an audience. The day after I agreed, I woke up to find those 2 standing at my attention in my yard. All their seller told me was I must not remove them, and that I must always watch them dance at night. She took a sip from her tea. At first, I was as confused and petrified as you. But then when I came down with a dreadful flu bug a week after I got them, they came into my house in the middle of the night and cured me. Since then, I've realized that they are protectors, as long as you serve as their audience. That's why I almost never leave. Someone has to be here to make sure they have an audience, that they don't stop protecting the house and whoever stays here. But last week, my brother-in-law was killed in a car accident, and my sister was distraught. I had to go and stay with her to make sure she was all right. That's why I was willing to pay a complete stranger so much money just to watch the place. Our conversation went on for a little longer, but in the end, I more or less got it. I was still creeped out by the whole thing, but after the dolls had healed me, well, I wasn't as scared as before. Thus, I began Agatha's regular house sitter. It was a fair bargain. She finally got to travel and visit people she hadn't seen in years, while I got a steady, lucrative income in exchange for watching her place, and as a result, the dancing dolls, whenever she called me. I'd been her regular house sitter for about a year when Melanie called. Melanie was the kind of sibling you wish you didn't have to associate with. She'd been a little gremlin since the day she was born, and her behavior had gotten worse with age. It didn't matter how many times my parents put her in timeout or she got detention in school. No mistake she made was her fault. Anything anyone else got was something she had to have, and anything that didn't go her way was worth screaming herself hoarse over. When I got into college, she'd thrown fit after fit about not being able to go to college herself until they let her take an early admissions test. When she passed, I still think she bought the answers off of someone. She packed her bags and went straight to the enrollment office. She immediately made herself the bane of everyone on campus's existence. Anytime she wasn't in class was spent hooking up with frat boys or getting blackout drunk. She constantly skipped classes, mouthed off to teachers whenever she bothered to show up, and she wound up having to rent an apartment off campus when she yelled transphobic slurs at a trans man and got herself banned from the dorms. She was eventually expelled, and my parents refused to let her move back in with them until she learned how to act like an adult. She swore she'd show them by marrying rich. In the 3 years since she'd made that deal, she'd gone through 4 different boyfriends and 9 different jobs, most of them at fast food joints. Refusing to admit defeat, she'd started trying to mooch off any relative that didn't already hate her. So, it shouldn't have been surprising when she called me, talking in that sickly sweet way she always did when she wanted either money or a favor. And he totally left me for no reason and said I would never get a job at his dad's modeling studio. She whined, finishing a clearly falsified story and giving a few fake sniffles. So anyway, if you know any way I could get a job, sorry Melanie, I can't help you job hunt. I cut her off as I finished stuffing clothes and my plush turtle into my duffel. I have something really important to do this weekend. Liar, she screamed through the phone. Mom said you landed a cushy job working for a rich lady. I want in. I sighed. Mom didn't have a filter and always babbled to everyone about everything. It's not that simple. This really is a one-person job and... Great, so quit and I'll take it. What's the address? I hung up. Melanie only ever heard what she wanted to hear. Given how completely insane my sister had always been, I really should have predicted what happened next. Agatha's brother was getting hip replacement surgery, and since it was last minute, she was paying me $7,000 to watch her house for a whole week. Obviously, I said yes. The rules hadn't really changed, and by then I had them memorized. I thought I knew what to expect, other than keeping the fish fed and watching the dolls dance. My days watching Agatha's house were quiet. What I didn't expect was the knock on the door I got on the first evening of my latest week there. Agatha hardly ever got visitors that weren't from people she'd hired, so naturally, I was startled. I looked at the clock. It was 8:30. I thought I'd have enough time to shoo away whoever was at the door before the dolls came alive. Unfortunately, when I opened the door, preparing to see a Jehovah's Witness or perhaps a salesman, I found my sister. Hey, Tiffany, thanks again for the job. Melanie didn't let me say that I had not gotten her a job, simply strolling in with her baby pink suitcase and self-centered attitude. She began chattering about how she managed to manipulate Mom into telling her what city I lived in, and the name of the woman I was working for. From there, she just stalked Agatha's name online until she found out where she lived. From there, she started talking about how excited she was to work for a fashion critic and how she was more than qualified to critique people's outfits. I finally found my voice, though I had to shout to make myself heard. Melanie, I did not find a job for you, and I'm definitely not giving up my job for you. You need to go. She froze. I hoped that I'd gotten through to her and glanced at the clock. 8:50. I had to work fast. Maybe I could promise to book her a hotel room and... You self-centered bitch. Excuse me? You know how badly I need a job? You knew I was perfect for the job of a fashion critic, and you wouldn't give up your job for me. You selfish bitch. Melanie, you've lost it. Why don't you? Are you trying to get rid of me? You are, I can tell. Mom and Dad got rid of me. Grandma got rid of me when I sold her car. Uncle Jake got rid of me when I broke his microwave. My boyfriend left me. My bosses all hated me. Now even my own sister? Well, tough. You're not getting rid of me that easy. She grabbed one of the antique bottles on Agatha's shelves and smashed it against the wall, sending glass shards to the floor before she came at me with the broken bottle. My self-preservation instincts took over, and I ran for the first exit I saw, the back door. As I ran, the doll's unearthly music began. I paled. I was too late. What would happen now that I had broken the rule? Come here, you family-betraying bitch. I forgot about the dolls as my sister came at me, screaming like a banshee. I tripped over one of the patio's footstools, landing flat on my back. She was on top of me in seconds, her eyes wide with madness as she tried to stab the broken bottle onto me. I pushed her back with all of my strength, my heart beating 1,000 miles a minute. She was stronger than me, stronger than I would have expected. She started pressing the bottle against me. Then Melanie saw something behind me and froze. What the? She was lifted off of me. My hands flew to my neck, gasping as I pressed against the cuts. I didn't have any trouble breathing, and to my relief, the cuts were only a flesh wound. Before I could get up, I felt someone's arms lifting me. I turned, but for once, I was relieved to see the female doll. Muffled screaming turned my attention to the male doll, who was holding my sister. The female doll continued to hold me as she watched her partner walk out of the patio, the struggling Melanie in his arms. From the front yard came the sound of the eerie music. With the female doll and myself as the audience, the male doll held Melanie in a bridal carry as he went to stand on a bare patch of grass. Then he began a slow single dance. It was a bit like a tap dance, only made more complicated due to carrying a struggling woman. As he spun her, though, Melanie seemed to enter a type of trance. He set her down and she stood, a dopey smile on her face. Their dance began something more akin to a waltz, with him leading her in one dizzying turn after another. When the music began to crescendo, he took her into his arms again. She stared at him with wonder, a big smile on her face. The female doll then turned, making sure I was facing the door into the house instead of the male doll, my sister. There was the sound of ripping seams, then a blood-curdling scream. Melanie's scream. Then, nothing. The female doll set me on the back patio's couch as the male doll came back. He was alone. The female doll put a hand on my throat, examining the cuts. Then she snapped, and I was out cold. The next morning, I turned on the news to find that the body of a woman who had been found in the woods nearly a mile away. Her broken-down car had been right next to her. Judging by the state of the corpse, the general consensus was that she'd been driving through the woods, decided to stop for whatever reason, and had been mauled to death by some sort of animal, with most people thinking it was a bear. I had a feeling I knew, but I wasn't about to say anything, seeing as how Melanie managed to tick off anyone who knew her for more than 30 seconds. No one was grieving especially hard. Agatha heard the news and called me. Apparently, that wasn't the first time the dolls had come to someone's rescue. Just be glad they enjoy an audience, she told me. Her tone was grim. If they ever find that you had no reason to miss a performance. A lump formed in my throat as I realized what she meant. Why am I saying all of this now? Agatha drafted her will yesterday. She has decided that she will leave her house to me to do with what I please. I've already decided to sell it. The money from such a sale would pay off the rest of my loans, and it's not like I need such a big house anyway. I finally managed to talk to Jeb, wondering if he could take the dolls when I sold the house. He said it was impossible. The house was now their home. It'll be a long while before Agatha passes, especially since she has a guaranteed way to recover if she's sick or injured. But when the time comes, be warned. If you happen to see a fancy mansion for sale and are told of a list of rules that must be followed, follow them. They won't like it if they lose their audience. Lima, India, Sierra. Written by Saturdead. A lot of people wonder why I don't carry around a smartphone. It's a strange thing not to have. I still have a phone, it's just that it's a very basic model and I only use it for calls or texts. I'm not even that old. Most figure I'm some kind of technophobe, but it's something different. My wife rolls her eyes every time she sees me making a call with it. She calls it my comfort brick. Meanwhile, she's checking out life hacks on TikTok. I've tried telling her about why I am this way a couple of times, but it's been hard to put into words. So, in an effort to collect my thoughts, I'd like to tell the world about what happened to me a couple of years ago, and, to an extent, what is happening still. I was working on my master's degree, but I was having a hard time finding something to write a paper about. I couldn't come up with a good subject, and time was running out. I managed to get a deadline extension, but only if I could present a suitable subject. I was about to give up when one of my professors suggested I talk to a man working in the private sector. He was a licensed physician who'd gone into private enterprise, but he was sure to have something interesting going on. I got in touch with him, and he asked me to come in the same day. Let's call him Solomon. Solomon and his team were working out of an honest-to-God laboratory. Most of their work revolved around medical hardware, so they had sterile white rooms to protect sensitive electronics. Solomon was about 6'6" and balder than a bowling ball. He towered over his workers and had a very soft demeanor. He would calmly shake my hand and nod as I presented myself. I got the impression that he was a kind man. You notice that sort of thing. As I explained my situation, he made a suggestion. I'm working on a project called LIS. I can't share all the production details, but we collect a lot of data related to sleep. I could share that data for your paper. That was amazing news. I could easily do a study with that kind of data to back me up. I was scheduled to help Solomon and his team to collect test subject for his LIS project. It was simple enough. People were supposed to take a supplement before they went to sleep and use a headband to record their experience. Didn't matter if they slept long, short, or barely anything at all. Data was data. This was bulk collection. They'd already gone through about 20 iterations of the project, so this would be the 21st generation. I wasn't allowed to take part in the earlier versions, but I was going to get full access to the Generation 21 bulk data. That would be more than enough to cover a master's study on a related subject. I put up some posters around campus, and it didn't take long for people to sign up. A lot of folks wanted to get their foot in the door of the private sector. Having Solomon's name on a CV could be more valuable than a quick payout, but they still got a symbolic sum as compensation for their trouble. As submissions started to roll in, Solomon brought something up. "Why don't you participate?" he said. "You could critique our methodology. We could separate your data if you think it would invalidate overall results, but I think it'd grant some valuable insight. You sure that'd be appropriate?" "Of course," he smiled. "You're already a part of this. Might as well get your hands dirty." I had a hard time saying no. I wanted to, but I couldn't. So, yeah, I signed up too. We ended up with 14 people in total. Some were medical students, others were dentists. There were even a couple of veterinarians. They were all invited in for a short presentation about the study and the various items they would be using. We were pressed into a cramped meeting room around an oval table with a projector showing an out-of-focus presentation on a sun-stained canvas. "Collection takes place over 2 weeks," Solomon explained, pointing to a calendar on the screen. "This allows us to account for irregularities. No worries if you miss a day or two, we've taken that into account." He showed us the items again. There was a headband that was used to record our sleep. It looked like something an 80s tennis player might use. There was a cable to charge it during the day. The other item was a small bottle of gel capsules. "This is a supplement to help us better record your experience. It does little to affect your sleep. We must insist that you take one about 10 minutes before you go to bed. 20 minutes if you had a big meal. Don't bite down on it, or your mouth will taste like a really crunchy salt. If you don't take it, don't bother with the headband. The data will be useless." It was a nondescript bottle, CMP5. It had a printed list of known side effects, but they were so generic that It might as well have been ibuprofen. There wasn't much more to it. We all got our kits, headed home, and that was that. I started working on my paper, charged the headband, and went on as usual. When it was time to go to bed, I did as instructed. I took a capsule, I put the headband on, and set my alarm. The headband was surprisingly comfortable. It even had a massage and heat setting. It had a thicker side, meaning you could turn it slightly and use it as a sleep mask. That suited me perfectly, so I'd wanted one for a long time. I figured I'd ask Solomon if I could keep it when the study was over, maybe in lieu of pay. The damn thing probably had Bluetooth speakers for white noise if I bothered to check. Going to sleep was surprisingly easy. I felt at peace. I had my alarm set and there was no disruption. No loud noises, no background hum, just the slight saltiness of the capsule on my tongue. What stayed with me all these years is what I dreamt on that first night. It was one of the clearest, most memorable dreams I have ever had. Not because it was amazing, but because it seemed so real. It was the first time I ever had a lucid dream, as in knowing I was sleeping. I dreamt I was at my old middle school, back in South Dakota. I walked down the hallway looking at all the pictures we'd put up. Most of the drawings just looked like mad scribbles, but every now and then you'd see something you recognized. A happy farmer, someone's dog, a sunflower, but the wrong color, mostly blue. It was all so real. The slate stone texture on the floor, the soundproof ceiling tiles that you could stick pens in if you flicked them hard enough, the wide hallways, allowing students to run up and down while leaving a lane for teachers down the middle. The welcome mat outside our homeroom, I remembered the font. I dreamt about some people I hadn't thought about in years. I could see my teacher at her desk, grading papers. There was a globe in the window, with plenty of grubby hand marks surrounding the continental US. Whenever someone went on a holiday trip, they were allowed to put a pin on the globe to show where they were going. I ran a hand across my old desk, feeling the notches bump against my nails. Then the speaker system crackled. I turned to see my teacher sit up straight. She looked at me and spoke in unison with the announcer. Lima, India, Sierra. I took a few steps closer. She kept eye contact with me. She was still grading papers with her right hand, turning the pages without looking away. Lima, India, Sierra. Someone walked past in the hallway. I could hear the chatter in the background of the PA system. Some of the pictures on the wall looked funny. One of the drawings had the number 21 on it. Lima, India, Sierra. She turned her attention back to the papers, and I could feel my blood run cold. Something was wrong. Something has irreversibly changed. I turn around and I see something, someone, and in a heartbeat, I woke up screaming. I threw the headband across the room, jumped out of bed, and I was wide awake. I'd only slept for 3 hours, but my heart was pounding out of my chest. I sprinted into the bathroom, washing my face with cold water. I looked at myself in the mirror, only to see that I had been crying. My face was red and puffy. I had to sit on my bed for a while, holding the headband. I was shaking with adrenaline, waiting to find the peace to go back to sleep. It took me the better part of an hour. I didn't use the headband as a sleep mask after that. I just wore it as intended. I got a couple of more hours, but it was a dreamless sleep. I scheduled a call with Solomon the next morning. I was halfway through a cheese and ham sandwich when he called me. I still had a stubborn cowlick that wouldn't go away, making me look like something out of a cartoon on a video call. "First night," Solomon said. "How'd it go?" "I'm gonna be honest. Not so great." "Nightmares, huh?" I wasn't prepared for him to admit it so openly. Before I could say anything, he cut me off. It's not uncommon. In fact, it's very helpful. We have more data than we need of people just sleeping, but nightmares, we don't have a lot of that. They're much more valuable to us. How did you know I had one? It's very common, he continued. Some get nightmares, some get a sense of claustrophobia, others just don't use the headband at all and call it quits after a couple of nights. If this is what it feels like, I get it. It was awful. Do you want to quit the study? I thought about it. I wanted to, but I couldn't afford to step off now. I had a paper to write, and I haven't gotten access to the data yet. Chances were, if I were to abandon the project, I'd be shit out of luck. I swallowed my fears and shook my head. No, I'm okay, I said. But I got a question. What's Lima, India, Sierra? That's just an activation phrase. LIS. It comes from the headband as a synchronization signal. Sort of like when you snap a clapperboard on a movie set. Is it dangerous? Solomon chuckled a little. It's just information. The next night, I was hesitant about going to bed. I drank some milk, got ready, and spent a full hour scrolling on my phone. I was hoping to get so tired that I didn't care anymore, but it was difficult. I got the impression that if nightmares were valuable data, maybe Solomon induced them. Maybe that's what the pill did. When I finally went to sleep, I was so tired I couldn't keep my eyes open. And once again, I had one of the most vivid dreams of my life. My high school gymnasium, completely empty. Every footstep echoed. Walls were decorated with images of important milestones. Then at some point, it started again. Not the PA system this time, but just this omnipresent voice, as if spoken by the walls themselves. Lima, India, Sierra. I remembered what happened last time I heard it. I spun around, looking for a solution. I was aware that I was in a dream, so I tried to think in terms of dream logic. Maybe I could hide? Lima, India, Sierra. I found this old speaker that was big enough for me to hide behind. I crawled in, closing my hiding space with a wooden panel. Lima, India, Sierra. Quiet. The tension lifts, and I can feel myself getting lighter. Something gently tugs at my wooden panel. I resist, but I don't have a good grip. It pulls back and I pull back. A moment of silence. The panel is ripped from my hands. I see 2 feet dangling in the air in front of me as something attacks. I fall out of bed, coughing and clutching my chest. I'm crying and I'm having trouble breathing from the snot covering my face. I am a wreck, and I've only just woken up. I got about 4 hours of sleep that night. This would go on for a couple of nights. I was a wreck, but I had studies to take care of. I still went to classes, I still worked on my paper, and I had a cheap cheese and ham sandwich in the cafeteria at lunch every day. This one time, as I sat down for lunch, I noticed I wasn't the only one yawning. Not that unusual, but I recognized a person across from me. It was one of the other people who'd signed up for the Solomon study. She was about my age, but in a different field. I could tell she was struggling too. People don't usually chug 2 Red Bulls for lunch. I got up and walked over to her. You're in Solomon's study, right? Yeah. She put her half-drunk can of Red Bull up to her temple, cooling her head. Mind if I join you? Knock yourself out. She introduced herself as Norma, Midwestern gal. Started her studies later in life than most of us. She had the appearance of someone who could probably cook one hell of a chili. Trouble sleeping, I asked, nodding to her energy drinks. Yeah. How about you? Same. We sat there for a moment, exchanging a couple of pleasantries. I was doing my master's thesis. She was about to start an internship. I hear this phrase," I said. "Whenever I hear it, I know it's about to get bad." She looks up, nodding enthusiastically. We say it at the same time. Lima, India, Sierra. Her eyes light up. "Yes," she exclaims. "That's it. I hear that one thing, and then he's just there." "Exactly," I say. Then pause. "Wait, who's there?" "You know, that person thing with the seam." "What?" "It's like a person, but like a seam down the middle. Maybe it's just me?" The following night, I try to look a little closer. I go into my dream with a mission: to gather information. Not only am I unusually aware of myself dreaming, but I also look closer at the environment. That time I was at the beach, a childhood memory. I could see my sister and mother swimming in the shallows. My father was there too, leaning back in a sun chair with a book. Then he turned to me, looking up over the pages. Without missing a beat, he turned a page and spoke aloud. "Lima, India, Sierra." And he repeated it over and over. And while the others played like I remembered, I was spinning around and looking for whatever Normal had been talking about. As I did, I noticed little details in the background. One of the billboards had changed text. Initial contact, 2 hours, 41 minutes, 18 seconds. After Dad repeated those same words for the third time, I felt a sense of calm. Then, terror. I spun around, looking every which way, only for something to change. I got a glimpse of someone pale, floating in midair. Someone humanoid, but the head looked a bit too bulbous. It didn't move its arms, just its vibrating chest. Then, I was awake. I didn't notice the transition until I gasped for air. I started having lunch with Normal regularly. We would share our experiences and discuss what we'd seen. For example, I shared the strange billboard text. She, on the other hand, had seen something similar. "I dreamt about my high school graduation," she said, "but my diploma looked like an email." "An email? What did it say?" I couldn't read it all before it got me, but there was an address. She handed me a slip of paper. I almost choked on my sandwich. It was Solomon's private email, the one I'd been handed by a professor when I first reached out to him. He didn't give this out to just anyone. I double-checked my phone and showed her it was the same. "That doesn't make sense," she mumbled. "How can anything from a dream be real?" There were more dreams, and every time I would get little glimpses. I would be someplace familiar, and at some point, I would hear those damn words. It could be bird chirping in the window, a TV running in the background, a ringtone, an alarm clock, a passing car. There was always something. Lima, India, Sierra. Then, something would happen. Something would attack. I usually saw it just before I woke up. For example, its fingers were tightly webbed. They couldn't flex. Also, it wasn't just pale. It was a light touch of green, like dry grass. And in every way I saw it, its feet never touched the ground. I would wake up screaming, crying, or falling out of bed. One time I was already standing up before I knew I was awake. I would feel so bad about going to bed that I'd end up staying up way too late, just making things worse. I tried to tell myself that this whole thing was on a timer, and that by the end I'd have a security feature, but it was hard to keep appearances up. My lunches with Norma later extended to others in the same study. I guess Solomon hadn't counted on us all going to the same cafeteria. There was Elmer, Candace, Joseph, Pat, and Misha. Everyone had a similar experience. Elmer swore that the thing didn't have a face. Candace said it looked like it floated in the air, like a propped up scarecrow. Joseph said it was bald, like Solomon. Pat said it never moved. It just appeared in midair. Misha, on the other hand, barely said anything at all. He hated just thinking about the damn thing. Norma was adamant about what she'd seen. The thing had a seam down the middle, but you could only see it when it got really close. Kinda like the spine of a leaf. And we all knew that just before waking up, it did something. Something sudden and dangerous. But we never remembered what. I think it was Candace who came up with the name, Floating Man. It was as good of a description as any. But more than that, it was strangely consistent. We could all see the same thing, no matter the environment. How could a single image resonate through several people at once? How can you share a dream? I remember us all sitting there, long after we'd finished our meals. No one knew what to say. What we'd experienced was unheard of. Even if one could induce a nightmare, it was unprecedented to have a single shared image, especially one that was so clear. I think it's the pills, I said. I don't think they're supplements. I think they're causing this. You think so? Norma asked. Solomon kind of hinted at it. He said having nightmares is valuable data. Everyone at the table groaned. It made sense. A bunch of underpaid students being used as guinea pigs. Could be some kind of mild Parkinson drug, Elmer suggested. Dopamine agonists? You really think they'd slip us something like that? Joseph asked. That's a lawsuit waiting to happen. Unless it was in the fine print, Candace added. Or it's something milder like SSRIs. We should try something, I suggested. What if, for just one night, we skip the pill? If we still get nightmares, it's the headband. If it's the pill, we can have it tested. It was an experiment. We liked experiments. We exchanged numbers and started a group chat to keep each other updated on our progress. It felt good going to bed that night. Either way, I was going to wake up the next day with some answers. I willfully picked up the bottle of capsules, rattled it, and wagged a finger. Not tonight. I put on some music, crawled into bed, and put the headband on. I checked in with the others. Some had already gone to bed. Others were still psyching themselves up. Norma was admittedly nervous. This whole thing would be a strange blip in the data for sure. But Solomon had already said he'd accounted for that. One day here and there wasn't all that bad. When I finally fell asleep that night, I felt confident. I didn't even realize I was asleep at first. It felt like closing my eyes and opening them again. But when I opened them, I was somewhere else. It was the shopping mall my mom and I used to go to when I was a kid. Most of the stores were still stocked with early 2000s fashion. And a handful of passerbys mirrored that. I could sense my mother on a bench, enjoying a soft serve. I walked around a little, feeling my confidence fade. Something was different this time. It was still one of those vivid dreams, but something felt wrong. A man in a stall turned his attention to me, looking across the hall. Lima. I sighed. It was gonna happen again, pill or not. It had to be the headband. I knew a comp sci guy. He could probably look into how the hell that thing works. I sat down, resigning myself to another scare. A woman walking out of a clothing store turned her head towards me while still walking the other way, speaking in a conversational tone. India. Looking around, I could sense something was off. There was other conversations happening. There was this young couple sitting at a juice bar, for example. They were having a conversation, but it didn't make any sense. They were lovingly looking into each other's eyes. As one said, induction stabilized, engagement in approximately 300 feet. The other kissed her hand and responded. Suppressor offline. Residual effectiveness 65%. Then they both turned to me. Their faces slack. Sierra. I looked around. They returned to the conversation. One of them would say a number. Then the other would say a lower number. They would be counting down. but not like a clock. It took me a moment to realize they were talking about distance. 200 feet, 100 feet, 50 feet. Attention shoppers, a speaker crackled. All systems nominal. 40 feet, 30 feet. I looked around, but I couldn't see anything. Why was this feeling different? I stepped out of the open, pressing my back up against the store window. They were still speaking, and the number was going down, but there was nothing for me to see. It had to be behind me. I turned around, but there was only a store mannequin, a blank, featureless face, slumped shoulders, and as I looked a little closer, it had a seam down the middle of its body. Something smacked into my chest. I felt a piercing pain as I was flung backward, knocking over the table the two lovers were using. They just stood back up, ignoring me completely. I touched my shoulder, only to feel real physical pain. There was blood on my hand. I wasn't waking up. The floating man had something moving in his chest as the seam closed. It pushed through the glass of the store window, moving through it without breaking it. I could hear a rhythmic pitter-patter as something solid touched the tiled floor. This thing wasn't just floating. It's more like it was being held up, and it was still coming for me. I ran up the escalator, passing an old woman as I went. She looked at me, shaking her head. Damage assessment, moderate. I didn't have time to think. Even then and there, my shoulder ached. I could feel the pain through my body. Looking back down, I could see the floating man coming closer, always a couple of inches off the ground, not flying across the room. I hurried past a hot dog stand. The text on the front made me pause. Lima, India, Sierra. I pushed the cart aside, hoping it would slow down whatever was coming my way. I passed a poster on the wall listing timestamps along with initials. It sort of looked like the way we structured bulk data. Was information from the study leaking into my nightmare? I hurried into the bathroom. There was another man there, washing his hands. I rushed into a stall, locked the door, and climbed up on the toilet. It took some effort to climb up, as it really felt like I'd been pierced through the shoulder. The nerve damage alone was enough to make my eyes water, and I had trouble staying quiet. I closed my eyes as hard as I could and bit my lip, hoping to distract myself from the pain. I didn't hear any doors open, just the pitter-patter of something taking careful steps. Then the man washing his hands stopped and spoke. Cortisol spike. Engagement in 3, 2, 1. A blank face passed straight through the stall door. I screamed as it pressed its chest against me. The floating man was so close that it could almost be a hug, making me look over its shoulder and past it. There was something behind it, something holding it up, like a puppet. The seam in its chest opened. I tried pushing it back, only to have my hand pierced by a bone-like protrusion. It went straight through the back of my hand, right below my left ring finger. It retracted and prodded again, lopping off the top of my middle finger entirely. It plopped against the floor tiles like I dropped a piece of sausage. I've never felt anything like that. Never. It wasn't just pain. It was a constant throbbing, nerve-searing pain. I braced against the back of the stall and kicked, pushing this thing out through the door. It gave me enough space to get out, turn a quick left, and run. I could feel it closing in as the pitter-patter followed. I got out of the bathroom, but I was bleeding profusely. It was only then that it hit me. I was lightheaded. How the hell can you be lightheaded in a dream? What happens when you fall asleep in a dream? What if you pass out? What if you die? I ran past the poster on the wall with timestamps. Some of the lines were crossed out. Making my way back into the main hall, I stood in the middle of the crowded mall, doing the only thing I could bring myself to. I screamed for help. I'm standing there, bleeding from my shoulder and hand, screaming for help, and all I see are these neutral faces turning my way. 190 BPM, adrenaline spiking. I kept screaming, but no one did anything, and from around the corner, I see the floating man. I close my eyes, scream, and tear at my face, begging myself to just wake up. For a brief moment, I managed to force my eyes open. I'm in my bed. I'm so sweaty that these sheets are sticking to me. I try to speak, but it just turns into a moan. My mouth is wide open and cotton-like, and I have no sense of control over my body. I'm not awake, but I'm not asleep. I flop my arm to the side, only to see blood on my hand. I try to force myself to move, to get out of bed, but nothing happens. I can hear myself snoring as my eyes start drifting downward. My eyes close and I'm back, but it's somewhere new. It's a traffic jam on the highway. A late afternoon, probably a memory. Someone is honking and we're miles from the closest exit. As soon as I can move, I get out of my car and go on foot. I pass by car after car. Then I stop. Something tickles my mind. I look a little closer at one of the cars, only to see Candace. She's leaning back in her seat. Something has torn through her chest, breaking her ribcage wide open. There's blood on the windshield. I try to convince myself that it's just a dream. I say it loud. I say it like a mantra, and as I do, her body slumps to the side, her eyes fixed on me. Lima. I shake my head. I run. I run as fast as I can, and despite it all being a dream, I can feel my thumping chest. Why is there still pain in my hands? Why is my shoulder still bleeding? I pass by a car with an open window. The driver fans themselves with the newspaper as a radio host speaks. India. I keep saying no, like there is someone there to listen. I put my hands over my ears, hoping it'll stop if I just don't hear it. I close my eyes as hard as I can, and when I open them, I see a license plate. Sierra. I dive under a car as someone breaks a window behind me. I'm almost crushed as an immense weight steps down on the car above me, but I manage to get out with just a sprained foot. I see the shadow of the floating man in the late afternoon sun. I pull on a door and get inside a random car, only for that blank face to pass straight through the passenger side window. Something grabs me by the chest and clothes and pulls me through the door like it was made of paper. A door is between me and the floating man, and something slams against it. I'm dropped on the asphalt like a wet towel. I try to get back on my feet, but I'm not fast enough. I pick the door up and wield it like a shield as something slams into it. Over and over again. I can see a sharp bone pierce through, just inches away from me. I push back as the door is ripped from me. I'm wide open and this thing is just a couple of feet away. I'm bleeding, limping, and wheezing for air. I step back, but I can tell I won't be fast enough. Not this time. The seam of its body opens all the way from the top of its head to the crotch. The floating man separates into two separate pieces as something reveals itself. There's a presence behind it, holding the two pieces up like a hand puppet. I can't tell what I'm really looking at. 6, maybe 8 legs. 2 halves of what looks like a human body from 2 front limbs. Mimicry to keep you looking where it wants to. And there's a head. A circular set of eyes, arranged in something resembling a mix of honeycomb and the seed pod of a flesh-like lotus. It's dripping, as dozens of bones poke in and out of would-be eyes, and it descends on me, unfolded, primal, and angry. I wake up, but I'm not breathing. I've fallen out of bed, accidentally losing my headband. I'm on the floor, having knocked the air out of my lungs. I'm bleeding. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I try to get up, but I'm limping. How can my foot hurt from a dream? I still can't breathe. I count 20 seconds. I get to the bathroom and topple over the sink. It cracks and falls, sending me to the ground. A piece of ceramic bumps against my chest, and something dislodges from my throat. I spit out a piece of cartilage, bloody and raw. As I lay on the bathroom floor, I can hear my phone exploding with messages and missed calls. I knew it was bad. I knew it. But for a moment, I just drew in breath and thanked whatever God may be to finally, truly be awake. I couldn't speak, but I managed to call for help. Doctors would later explain that I had severe damage to my windpipe. I had several burst blood vessels, most of which were concentrated around my arm, stomach, and shoulder. They thought I had fallen down a flight of stairs. They did not accept the explanation that it all happened in my sleep. It was impossible. The body can't do that to itself like that. When I got a chance to catch up with my messages and calls, I realized I wasn't the only one who'd gotten hurt. Norma was in surgery. Pat had a broken leg. Candace wasn't even answering. We would later find out she died in her sleep. They couldn't find any connection. The pills we took were just a mineral supplement. The headband was flashy lights, a speaker, some electrodes, and a memory card. Nothing malicious. I ended up staying in the hospital overnight. Before I left the next day, I had a surprising visitor. No one came to announce him, and no one prepared me. He walked right in. Solomon. I was still in bed, and he sat down next to me. He almost looked apologetic. "You all right?" he asked. I shook my head, pointing to my throat. "Ah," he said, nodding. "Sorry, we've been adamant about people taking the suppressor pill, but we had no idea LIS was effective enough to..." He paused himself, shook his head, and smiled. He looked excited. "I mean, you had some residual effects. You were technically still protected, and it still managed to do all this. Can I see?" He stepped closer and I held up an arm, shielding myself. With my other hand, I buzzed for a nurse. Sorry, I'm just curious. This is a great development. We've got enough to get started on the next phase. I am more than thankful, and I want you to know that." Solomon got up, heading for the door before a nurse could get there. He looked back a final time. It really is just information, and information is so much cheaper than, say, a missile. Despite it all, Solomon was true to his word. I got a great recommendation, I finished my master's paper, and I could put my work on his project on my CV. I don't even know why, but mentioning I worked on the Liminal Intrusion System, or LIS, has opened all kinds of doors. Private sector, government, I could take my pick. Candace passed away in her sleep. Norma tried to look into it, but all signs pointed to a brain aneurysm. None of us who skipped out on the pill that night was spared. The study was called off, not because it was deemed the cause, but because they got all the data they were looking for. I've come a long way in my career since then. Solomon is still active, and his team has come a long way since they had to use the headbands. I think they solved their visual transmission problems. Wouldn't surprise me if all they need is lights now. That's why I don't use a phone anymore. I know what they're capable of doing. I know that if I step too far out of line or say something I'm not supposed to, I could go to sleep one night and never wake up. And the worst thing is, I would know it's coming. I just need to hear those 3 words, and I know it's happening. Lima, India, Sierra. I went off trail in Eastern Europe and barely made it out alive. Something in the tall grass almost killed me in Romania. Written by Something Goes Here Too. Look, I know how this sounds. Another 20-something backpacker with a trust fund and daddy issues, right? Finding myself across 3 continents like some cliche from a Gap Year brochure, but hear me out. I'm Andrew, and yeah, I was trying to find myself, as corny as that sounds. Klamath born and raised, bro. Those mountains taught me everything about reading terrain, surviving in the backcountry, and respecting the wilderness. By the time I turned 25, I had already knocked out some serious treks. We're talking about the Andes in Peru, where the altitude will drop you if you're not careful, the Cameron Highlands in Malaysia during the monsoon season, 3 weeks solo in the Yukon Territory, where the grizzlies outnumber the people about 50 to 1. Hell, I even did a walkabout in the Australian outback with nothing but a water filter and some emergency rations. The point is, I wasn't some tourist with brand new gear and zero experience. I knew my stuff. Could set up camp in a whiteout, navigate by stars, identify edible plants, the whole deal. But the steppes of Eastern Europe? That was the only place I've ever been legitimately afraid I was going to die. Not hypothermia, not dehydration, not getting lost. Something inhuman. Something that made me understand why some places have warnings that go way deeper than stay on marked trails. This was about 10 years ago, when I was still stupid enough to think experience trumped local knowledge every single time. I was working my way across Eastern Europe, planning to hit all the major trail systems from the Carpathians down through the Balkans. Had this whole route mapped out on my GPS watch. Hostels booked, the works. Not exactly the most popular trekking route, but that's what appealed to me. Lesser known trails, you know? None of that overcrowded Alps BS where you're basically walking in a conga line of German tourists. I'd done my research, knew the area could be tricky navigation, since there aren't many landmarks, but I had good topo maps and solid GPS backup. The weather looked stable. I was carrying a week's worth of food, plenty of water purification tablets, standard cold weather gear, even though it was late spring. The locals weren't exactly enthusiastic about my plans. This old guy at the outdoor supply shop kept shaking his head when I showed him my route. Stay on trails. Stay near roads. He kept saying in broken English. Not go through tall grass alone. I figured it was the usual rural paranoia about outsiders. Maybe some old Soviet-era superstitions about wandering around in restricted zones. Plus, my Romanian was garbage and his English wasn't much better, so I figured we were just having a communication breakdown. Should have listened. The border crossing from Moldova into Romania was more of a hassle than I'd expected. There's no real infrastructure for foot traffic at most of these crossings. They're designed for cars and trucks, not some American with a backpack trying to walk between countries. The Moldovan guards barely glanced at my passport, but the Romanian side was different. The officer looked maybe 25, probably bored out of his mind working this remote crossing. He flipped through my passport, asked me a bunch of questions in broken English about where I was going, how long I planned to stay, and whether I had accommodations booked. When I was explaining I was planning to hike overland down through the Balkans, his expression changed. He called over an older guard, and they had a rapid conversation in Romanian that I couldn't follow. Finally, the older guy looked at me and said, "You have guide?" "No guide. I'm experienced. I have maps, GPS." More Romanian between them. Then the younger officer held out his hand in that universal gesture that means one thing. I slipped him a 20-euro note, and suddenly my paperwork was in order. But as I was shouldering my pack to leave, the older guard grabbed my arm. His English was better than I'd expected. "You stay on marked trails only. Keep near farms. If you find tall grass, stay out. It's dangerous." Oddly mirroring the warning from the supply shop owner. I thanked him and assured him I'd be careful, but I could see in his eyes he didn't think I was taking it seriously enough. He was right. I should have asked him what kind of danger. Should have pressed for details instead of just nodding and walking away like I knew better. Instead, I crossed into Romania thinking I'd just gotten the standard tourist warning about wolves or wild boar. Maybe some concern about unexploded ordnance from old conflicts. I had no idea they were trying to save my life. The first 2 days went exactly as planned. Made good time, terrain was manageable, weather held up, the hostels were warm and friendly. But I was burning through more miles than expected on the established trails, and my GPS was showing this game trail that would cut about 15 miles off my route to the next resupply point. 15 miles is huge when you're carrying a full pack. Game trails are usually pretty reliable. Animals know the easiest paths better than any human trail designer, so I went off trail. The game trail was solid at first, well worn, maybe 2 feet wide, cutting straight through this endless sea of tall grass and scrubland. The steps out here weren't like anything I'd seen before. Not prairie grass like in the Midwest or the scrubland I was used to from California. This stuff grew in thick, irregular clumps. Some patches knee-high, others reaching almost to my chest. Dense enough that you couldn't see more than maybe 20 yards in any direction. My topo maps showed this whole area as intermittent farmland and low-lying scrub. But on the ground, it was just grass. Endless and tall, swallowing the horizon. It felt like the map was a lie, and I had wandered into some nature preserve or government land. Maybe a large industrial farm had gone fallow for years. What it felt like most was that I'd walked into the part of the country that wasn't supposed to be there, or walked back in time. The landscape was almost primordial. I'd been following the trail for about an hour when things started feeling off. Hard to explain exactly what I mean by that. You know how in the mountains you can feel weather changes in your bones before the barometer drops? This was similar but different somehow. Like the landscape itself was subtly off kilter. The wind patterns weren't making sense. I'd feel a breeze from the east, then a few steps later, it would shift completely, coming from the south, then die altogether. But the grass wasn't moving with it consistently. Some patches would sway normally. Others would stay perfectly still, even when I could feel the wind on my face. I stopped, did a full 360-degree scan like I'd been trained, listened hard. The usual step sounds were there. Insects, some distant bird calls, that constant whisper of grass moving against itself. Nothing obviously threatening, but my gut was telling me something different. That's when I heard the thunder of hooves. A whole group of wild boar came crashing through the grass, maybe 30 yards to my left, running flat out like something was chasing them. Must have been 8 or 10 of them, including a massive sow that had to weigh 300 pounds easy. They were moving perpendicular to my trail and didn't even seem to notice me. My heart rate spiked for a second. Wild boar are no joke if they decide you're a threat, but they were clearly running from something. Not at me. Probably spooked by my scent and bolting for safer territory. I laughed at myself, took a drink of water, and kept walking. But that feeling of being watched never went away. And now, I was starting to notice other things. Patches of grass that seemed to move independently, flowing in patterns that didn't match the wind. Always just at the edge of my peripheral vision. Always stopping the moment I turned to look directly. Something was tracking me through the grass. Something that knew how to stay hidden. I had maybe 2 seconds between seeing the grass part and the thing hitting me. It came from directly ahead, staying so low to the ground that I barely caught the movement. Just this ripple in the grass, like a boulder rolling downhill. Except boulders don't move that fast, and they sure as hell don't have teeth. I did what I thought would work with aggressive wildlife. Threw my pack hard to the left, hoping to distract it, and drove right into the thickest patch of grass I could see. It was a gamble, but I figured anything was better than just standing there. The thing didn't even glance at my pack. I hit the ground and immediately tried to roll, get my feet back under me, but something clamped down on my left leg just above my ankle, like a steel trap covered in sandpaper. The pressure was incredible, like it was going to snap my tibia in half. Then it started dragging me. I'm telling you, I've been in situations before. Rock slides, flash floods, and even had a mountain lion stalk me for half a day in the Sierras. But getting dragged backwards through tall grass by something you can't even see clearly, that's a whole different kind of terror. My hands clawed at everything. Grass roots, rocks, anything to slow down the drag. The thing was hauling me like I weighed nothing, maybe 30 or 40 yards through this maze of vegetation. I could hear my jacket tearing, felt the ground scraping against my back and shoulders. My hiking pants were getting shredded against whatever was holding me. I tried to twist around to see what had me, maybe get a good kick in with my free leg. But every time I lifted my head, all I could make out was this shape that seemed to shift and blur, like it was made of the same grass and earth it was moving through. Then suddenly, it let go. I scrambled backwards on my hands and ass, putting distance between me and whatever was out there. Heart hammering so hard, I thought it might burst. My leg was on fire where it grabbed me, but everything still moved, which meant nothing was broken. The grass around me was completely still. No movement, no sound except my own ragged breathing. But I knew it was still there, watching me. I sat there in the grass for maybe 30 seconds, trying to get my breathing under control, when I noticed something was wrong with my leg. The bite marks were deeper than I'd thought. 4 puncture wounds, 2 on each side of my calf, like it had grabbed me with oversized fangs. But that wasn't the scary part. The scary part was how the skin around the wounds was already starting to change color. At first, I thought it was just blood pooling under the skin, normal bruising from the pressure. But bruises don't spread that fast, and they sure as hell don't turn that shade of greenish black. The discoloration was creeping outward from each puncture, maybe a half an inch in diameter already, and I could feel this weird tingling sensation moving up toward my knee. Venom. The thing had injected me with something. I've been bitten by rattlesnakes before, an occupational hazard when you spend enough time in the California backcountry. I know what venom feels like as it starts working through your system. This was different though. Rattlesnake venom burns. This felt cold, like ice water spreading through my veins. My hands were shaking as I rolled up my pant leg to get a better look. The puncture wounds weren't bleeding much, but the skin around them was starting to swell. When I pressed on the discolored area, I couldn't feel my finger. The numbness was spreading faster than the discoloration. I had to move. Now. Whatever this thing had pumped into me, I couldn't let it reach my core circulation. If it got to my heart or lungs before I found help, I was done. I pulled my belt off, wrapped it around my thigh as tight as I could, and buckled it. The pressure was immediate and brutal, but it would slow the venom spread, maybe buy me a few hours. My pack was still sitting where I'd thrown it, about 20 yards away. I could see the thing hadn't touched it, which meant it was either gone or waiting to see what I'd do next. I couldn't worry about that now. I needed my first aid kit, my GPS, and whatever water I had left. The nearest help was less than a few hours hike if I pushed hard. I just had to make it that far before my leg rotted off. I made it maybe half a mile before I had to stop relying on both legs. The hiking pole became a crutch, taking most of my weight while I dragged my left leg behind me. Every step sent jolts of pain up through my hip, but the alternative was worse. The weird thing was how quiet everything had gotten. No more rustling in the grass, no sense of being stalked. At first, I thought that was good news. Maybe the thing had given up, moved on to easier prey. Then I realized what was actually happening. It didn't need to hunt me anymore. The venom would do the work for it. All the thing had to do was follow at a distance and wait for the poison to drop me. Then it could feed at its leisure. The thought made me push harder, even though my leg was starting to look like something out of a medical textbook. The swelling had gotten so bad that I had to cut my pant leg open with my utility knife. The discoloration had spread past my knee, creeping up my thigh in these twisted, vein-like patterns that looked awful. I was following what looked like an animal trail, hoping it would lead to higher ground where I could get my bearings. When the grass opened up into this shallow depression, maybe 15 feet across, carved into the earth like a giant's footprint, that's when I saw them. Eggs. Dozens of them. clustered in the center of the depression like some kind of reptilian nursery. Each one was about the size of a football, with shells so thin they were almost transparent. I could see things moving inside, dark shapes that shifted and pulsed with their own rhythm. But what made my stomach drop wasn't the movement. It was the color changes. The things inside the eggs were cycling through different hues. Brown, green, gray, like they were practicing camouflage before they even hatched. I had stumbled into a breeding ground. The adult that had bitten me wasn't protecting territory. It was protecting its young. And if there were eggs that developed, there were probably other adults nearby. Maybe a whole family of these things, waiting in the grass around the nest. I backed away from the depression as quietly as I could, trying not to disturb anything, trying not to think about how many more of them might be out there. My leg felt like it was on fire now, the numbness replaced by this deep, throbbing ache that pulsed with my heartbeat. I had to get out of here. I had to get away from this nest and away from this entire area. However far these things claimed as their hunting ground, I needed to go beyond it before the venom finished whatever it was doing to me. I gripped my hiking pole tighter and started moving again, twice as fast as before, even though every step felt like my leg might snap in half. An hour later, I forced myself to stop. My body was shutting down whether I liked it or not. I found a patch of slightly higher ground where I could see maybe 50 yards in each direction and collapsed against my pack. The GPS said I still had 5 miles to the nearest buildings marked on the map. A farm, probably, maybe a small village. 5 miles normally wouldn't even register as a real hike, but with my leg the way it was, it might as well have been 100. I made myself eat half a protein bar and drink some water, even though my stomach was cramping up. Dehydration would kill me faster than the venom if I weren't careful. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, following basic wilderness survival protocols, while something actively trying to digest me from the inside out. This wasn't the first time I've been in serious trouble in the backcountry. I got bit by a diamondback in Joshua Tree about 6 years ago. Had to hike 4 miles back to the trailhead with my leg swollen up like a balloon. Spent 3 days in the hospital, but I made it out. There was that time in Colorado where I got my foot wedged under a boulder during a river crossing. Took me 2 hours to work myself free, and by then, hypothermia was setting in from the snow melt. I was shaking so hard I could barely grip my gear, but I got myself to shelter and rode it out. The point is, I had been hurt before. I'd been scared before. I knew how to push through when everything in your body is telling you to quit. But this was different. Those other times, I knew what I was dealing with. Snakebite, hypothermia, dehydration. There are protocols for that stuff. Treatment options. This thing that had bitten me, I had no idea what its venom was designed to do, how fast it worked, what the end game looked like. I caught myself starting to roll up my pant leg to check the wound and stopped. I didn't want to know. Whatever was happening down there, looking at it wasn't going to help anything. All it would do was freak me out more, maybe make me panic when I needed to stay focused. 5 miles. That was the only number that mattered now. I shouldered my pack, adjusted my grip on the hiking pole, and started moving again. One step at a time, like always. Just like every other mountain I'd ever climbed, every trail I'd ever finished. The difference was, this time, the mountain was trying to kill me from the inside. I was maybe 2 miles closer to the farm when I saw it again. This time I had the advantage. I was coming up a slight rise, using my hiking pole to pull myself along, when something made me stop. Maybe it was the way the grass looked odd about 30 yards ahead, or maybe my subconscious picked up a movement that didn't match the wind patterns. Whatever it was, I dropped low and stayed perfectly still. At first, I couldn't make out anything unusual, just more of the same endless grass, swaying in the afternoon breeze. Then the breeze stopped, and one patch kept moving. The thing was massive, easily 12 feet long, maybe more, with the bulk of a saltwater crocodile, but completely different in every way. Instead of 4 legs, it had 6, 3 on each side, spaced evenly along its body like some kind of prehistoric centipede. But the weirdest part was watching its skin change. I'd seen chameleons do their color shifting thing before, but this was on a completely different level. The creature's hide rippled and flowed through different patterns: brown earth tones, green grass colors, even the dappled shadows where sunlight filtered through the vegetation. It wasn't just changing color, it was changing texture too, mimicking the look of dried grass stalks and broken earth so perfectly that even knowing exactly where it was, I kept losing track of its outline. The head was pure nightmare fuel, flat and wide, kind of like a cobra, but proportioned for something 10 times bigger. When it turned slightly, I could see these yellow eyes scanning the area with an intelligence that made my skin crawl. This wasn't some dumb predator operating on instinct. This thing was thinking. 6 legs. I'd been hiking and camping for over a decade, studied wildlife biology in college, and spent time with rangers and naturalists all over the world. Nothing I'd ever heard of had 6 legs and looked like that. This was something completely unknown. Something that had been hiding out here for who knows how long. I had to get a picture. Nobody would believe this without proof. And if I didn't make it out, at least there would be evidence of what killed me. Moving as slowly as possible, I pulled my phone from my jacket pocket. No service, like I expected, but the camera still worked. I lined up the shot, zoomed in as much as I could, and held my breath. The shutter click seemed to echo across the entire steep. The creature's head snapped toward me instantly, those yellow eyes locking onto my position with terrifying precision. I pressed myself into the grass, trying to become part of the landscape, but I could hear it moving now. Not the heavy thrashing I'd expected, but this smooth, almost silent gliding sound as it flowed through the vegetation toward me. I closed my eyes and tried to stop breathing. My leg was throbbing in rhythm with my heartbeat, and I was sure the thing could smell the infection, the venom, whatever chemical markers I was throwing off as its poison did its work. The sounds stopped maybe 10 yards away. I could feel it there, waiting, testing the air. Seconds crawled by like hours. Then, finally, the gliding sound moved away, heading off toward the east. I waited another 5 minutes before I dared to lift my head. It was gone, but I knew it might circle back. These things were smart, patient. I had to move fast. I checked the photo on my phone. Blurry, but you can make out the basic shape, the weird proportions, the 6 legs. If I made it to that farm, this would change everything. Cryptozoologists would lose their minds. But first, I had to survive the next 2 miles with a leg that felt like it was dissolving from the inside out. The last half mile was pure hell. My vision kept swimming in and out of focus, and I was leaning so heavily on the hiking pole that my shoulder felt like it was going to dislocate. Every step sent waves of nausea through my system, but I could see buildings ahead. Long, industrial structures that had to be some kind of agricultural operation. I stumbled through a gap in a wire fence and onto a dirt road. My legs gave out about 50 yards from the nearest building, and I hit the ground hard, my hiking pole clattering away across the gravel. Voices started shouting in Romanian, footsteps running toward me. I tried to sit up, tried to explain what had happened, but the words came out as gibberish. Through the haze, I could make out the word Agroin Industria painted across one of the buildings. but the rest of the company name kept shifting and blurring like it was underwater. Strong hands lifted me, and I heard someone curse when they saw my leg. One of the workers, a middle-aged guy in coveralls, was pointing at the wound and shouting, "Ambulanta, ambulanta," to someone with a radio. Another voice, older, gravelly, said something that included, "Blar de Araba." The word sent a chill through the other workers. They all started talking at once, their voices tight with what sounded like genuine fear. Grass dragon. Even through the venom haze, I understood that much. They knew about these things. They had a name for them. My breathing was getting more labored, each inhale feeling like I was trying to suck air through wet concrete. The world was tilting sideways, and I couldn't tell if I was lying down or standing up anymore. I rolled over, and my mind felt like it short-circuited. The steeps I had walked through were gone, just vanished. Where before there was an endless sea of grass, now it was what looked like miles of farmland. Surely this must have been just an effect of the venom. I felt my consciousness slipping away. The last thing I remember clearly was the interior of an ambulance, the rhythmic bump of tires on asphalt, and a paramedic working over my leg while speaking rapid-fire Romanian into a radio. The siren seemed to be coming from very far away, like I was underwater. Then, everything went black. I'm sitting in my study right now, looking at a printout of that photo. 10 years later, and it's still the only proof I have that any of this really happened. The image quality is terrible. You can barely make out the creature's outline through the grass, and the 6 legs just look like shadows and vegetation to most people. I've shown it to cryptozoologists, wildlife biologists, and even posted it on forums dedicated to unknown species. The response is always the same. Obviously photoshopped or camera artifact, or my personal favorite, "Nice try, but we can spot a fake from a mile away." I don't blame them. If someone had shown me this picture before my trip to Romania, I would have said the same thing. I roll up my pant leg and look at what's left. My leg now ends slightly below the knee. The rest is a steel and plastic prosthetic. Sometimes, when the weather changes, my knee aches with a deep, bone-level pain that reminds me exactly how close I came to never making it home. The hospital records from Redacted are pretty sparse. I was there for 6 days. Apparently, I only remember fragments. IV drips, doctors speaking in rapid Romanian, someone asking me questions in broken English about what had bitten me. When I tried to explain about the creature, about the camouflage and the 6 legs, they just nodded politely and wrote something down that probably translated to, "Patient is delusional from venom exposure." The flight back to the States is mostly a blur too. I was still pretty messed up, running on whatever cocktail of antibiotics and anti-venom they had pumped into me. But I made it home, and after a few months of physical therapy, I was almost back to normal. Almost. I still hike, still travel, but I'm different now in ways that are hard to explain to people who haven't been where I've been. When locals tell me not to go somewhere, I listen. When my gut says something feels off about a trail or a campsite, I trust it. And when I'm in a remote country, I pay attention to sounds that don't belong and movements that feel off or don't match the wind. Because I learned something out there that no amount of wilderness expertise had taught me before. The world is bigger and stranger than any of us want to admit. There are things out there, creatures, that evolution forgot to tell us about. Ecosystems that operate by rules we haven't figured out yet. And sometimes, no matter how prepared you think you are, hubris can be just as deadly as anything with teeth and venom. I paralyzed my little brother while pulling a prank. When I was 11 and my younger brother was 9, I passed to the dark side. We used to regularly prank each other and the rest of our family. Most of the time it was harmless, like removing the light bulb from a closet and then jumping out to scare the person who came inside. We had a pretty good one where we would take all of the chocolate chip cookies out of the container and switch them with oatmeal raisin. Haha. There was one instance though that I crossed the line. I had just seen Home Alone and I had loved the idea of having this really extensive and detailed plans for a trap. I spent a week or two trying to come up with my own crazy plans, most of which were impossible because they involved some sort of catapult. But I did come up with one that I thought was ingenious, and I wanted to use it on my little brother. So while my brother was outside playing, I decided to set my trap. It started with me pouring shampoo and some water in a bucket. Then I took a whole bunch of glue and feathers and poured them all over the shower curtain in the bathroom. I removed the light bulb in the bathroom. Then I took the bucket of shampoo water and dumped it on the floor. My plan was to have my brother come into the bathroom, slip across the floor, and then either fall onto or grab the shower curtain for support. He would then be stuck to the shower curtain and be stuck with a feather cape. It was really stupid, and I was an idiot. Well, it worked. He came into the bathroom, slid across the floor, and hit it into the shower curtain. Only he didn't stop slipping. He slipped and hit the base of his neck on the edge of the bathtub. I don't remember much immediately after that. I think I blacked out. That was 15 years ago. My brother still can't walk. He's stuck in a wheelchair. He has almost no movement from the neck down. He can barely talk, and it is a struggle to get out 1 or 2 words. For me, the worst part is that he can still control his facial expressions pretty well. I apologize to him every day for years. I still do it fairly often now. He always has this look. He smiles and says, "It's okay." He smiles with his mouth, but not his eyes. I've seen him smile for real, but I can see the resentment in his eyes. I'm the worst person alive. I'm an idiot. My girlfriend committed S-word after I cheated on her. I then proceeded to tell her family and all of her friends that she had cheated on me. This happened 2 years ago. Basically, she was an angel, and I was a terrible boyfriend who took her for granted. She was too good to me, and for some reason, it made me resent her. I wanted to hurt her. So I brought a random girl into her apartment while she was at work. I had the key and she had given me permission to go in at any time, and made sure she caught me having intimacy with her when she came in. Of course, I made it seem like it was all her fault for not appreciating me. We were both in our mid-20s, and I thought this was just what I was supposed to do as a man. I thought that, as men, we all had an unspoken agreement is that we exist to torture women and pretend it doesn't happen. Anyway, I called her a worthless B-word and dumped her. 3 days later, she committed S-word. I told all of our family and friends that I had caught her in my bed/apartment with another guy, and that she freaked out when I wouldn't take her back. I turned the whole story around. The worst thing is that everyone believed it, as I knew they would. This only furthered my belief about women being inferior and existing to suffer. People always blame women for everything, even when it's clearly not their fault. Lately, I've been feeling guilty and I don't know why. She's dead and gone, but she was really a good girl. And now let's get into some of the top comments. Someone said, "Wow, I'm kind of hoping that the reason you're beginning to feel bad about the situation is that you have taken a long, hard look at yourself and don't like what you see. If this is the case, then there's a slim chance of you growing as a human being and becoming a real man. At the moment, you're a liar, cheat, and a condescending bully. Maybe you're transferring your thoughts about yourself into women? Have you thought about therapy? It might help and in turn allow you to have an adult relationship in the future. I wish you well on your journey." Another person says, "They believe you because it's a believable story that people cheat. They believe you because you are one still here to tell the truth, unlike your girlfriend. She put enough faith in you that it literally destroyed her world when she saw the real you. I just wish all those around you could see you for the sociopathic, misogynistic wolf in sheep's clothing you are. Then maybe you'd change. She was a good girl and you are/were a bad person. You feel guilty, if you even do, because you were in fact guilty of some vile things. Truly admit to yourself your actions, realize the impact, become a better person than you are. You owe her that much at least." And another person says, "You should be the one who's dead. Some soul even slightly better than you is worth living. Remember this till the day you die. You don't deserve to live. You don't deserve happiness. Even death won't free you."
And do you know what's scarier than some of these Reddit threads? Not having some extra cash on hand. You know, finding an extra money for gaming, shopping, or even travel can just be tough. But what if I told you there's an easy way to earn money just by playing games? That brings us to today's sponsor, FreeCash. FreeCash is an online platform where you can make money simply by playing mobile games. It's completely free to sign up and has a 4.7-star rating on Trustpilot, so it's a legit and trusted platform. Take a look at the interface. You can see all the different games available. This time I downloaded Monopoly Go because everyone is playing it right now. And just by rolling the dice and building up my boards in my spare time, I've already made money. Just make sure your app tracking is enabled so FreeCash can reward you properly. You can play while watching TV, commuting, or just relaxing and watching one of my videos. I even made a small in-game purchase in Monopoly Go to get extra dice rolls and speed up my progress. And FreeCash gave me cashback rewards for it, so, good deal. When you're ready, you can withdraw your earnings instantly. I'm cashing out via PayPal, but they have other options like crypto, gift cards, and more. Don't miss out. Scan the QR code on the screen right now or click the link over at signupfreecash.com/snook to get a $10 bonus on your first offer. Keep in mind, your interface might look a little different depending on where you live, but the functionality is exactly the same. Go to signupfreecash.com/snook or scan that QR code and start earning today.
And now, let's get back into it. And this next confession is from a Ask Reddit question. And the original Ask Reddit question was, "People of Reddit, have you ever killed anyone? If so, what were the circumstances?" And one commenter says, "Throwaway for obvious reasons. When I was 12, I was babysitting for a family in my subdivision. There were 2 little girls and a baby. I had experience babysitting, but wasn't great with babies. I was real nervous and not the most responsible/adult kid anyway. The kids were sitting on the living room floor reading, and the baby started crying from her crib. I picked her up and took her into the kitchen to warm up her milk bottle in the microwave. I simply dropped her. I've been over this 1,000 times in my head, and there is no other way I can explain it. I dropped her, and her head hit the tile floor. She was very clearly dead immediately. The weirdest part is how calm I felt. Like I turned into a robot. I told the girls to go to the basement immediately and called my dad and told him what happened. Then I sat at the kitchen table for 10 minutes while he came over. He drove the girls to our house to be with my mom, then drove me and the body to the hospital. Obviously, nothing could be done. I was not charged because it was ruled an accidental death. There was a chance I could have been charged with criminally negligent manslaughter, but was not, in part because of my age. This was several decades ago, and I still feel it every day. I am a woman, and do not think I can ever have children because of it. The family moved, but until they did, I had to throw up every time I drove past their house or saw one of them in the community. And now let's get into some of the relevant comments. Someone says, "Holy shit, what was the family's reaction?" And the OP replies and says, "I did not have to deal with this much. My dad called them from the hospital. It was the middle of the afternoon and they were both at work. This was over the summer and both my parents were teachers. I know that it was not a good experience for him, but we have never really talked about it. My mom came and picked me up from the hospital, and my dad stayed while they came over. I will never be able to repay him for doing that. I think he thought I was 12 and it would not help to see the parents in hysterics. I saw them at the wake and funeral about a week after it happened. We were a middle-sized suburb, so people knew that it happened while I was sitting. But to the parents' credit, they never said anything nasty about me. Or at least I never heard anything like that. It was considered a tragedy in our community, and some kids at school called me baby killer and other real original stuff. But most people were sensitive enough to not say anything or just give me a hug/pity eyes. At the wake, the mom came up to me and hugged me and told me that she didn't blame me. That was pretty much the only time we spoke about it. They moved about a year and a half after it happened. And this next one is very, very disturbing. So viewer discretion is advised, and just trigger warning, this one is graphic. Let's get into it. I am an active predator. Before the morality police jump on me, I'll point out that this is the Confessions subreddit, and that I'm posting because I normally have to keep this a secret, and I felt like it'd just be liberating to just say openly what I'm into and what I do. And if you want to be R-word and judgmental, you can just go F off. I know that my preferences and actions aren't consistent with traditional morality, but of course that's all relative to culture. And it's just been my bad luck to live in a time and place where my preferences are considered taboo. So, I'm an active predator, which means that I regularly have intimacy with minors. My preference is between single digits and low teen years. And also, just another disclaimer, I will be censoring a lot. I am not getting into everything he said because truly, this is one of the worst confessions I have ever read, and it is just disgusting. I will not read everything. I will censor a lot of it, but I'll just get into the gist of it. But let's continue. Professionally, I am a minor psychologist. I have 2 PhDs, and I work part-time as an adjunct at a major research university. Obviously, it's part of my job to understand how minors think, and my work has put me in contact with hundreds of minors over the years. I have only had intimacy with a small percentage of them, those whom I can be responsibly confident won't tell anyone, and whom I believe may enjoy the experience. And I'm going to skip a little bit, and he says, in general, I don't care whether my actions will harm the minor when I choose to get intimate with him or her. I have 2 daughters, both aged very young. I have never violated the one, the older one, who's still a teenager. Their mother, my wife, died from breast cancer 3 years ago. The older one goes to a boarding school in Michigan where she studies flute. I have been having regular intimacy with the younger one since she was single digits. I don't necessarily prefer boys or girls. Both are attractive to me. I've always been attracted to minors since I myself was a minor. I guess as I grew older, I never stopped finding people of that particular age range desirable. I suppose I generally prefer consensual intimacy, although I also find forced scenarios also intriguing. I don't keep a tally, but I'd estimate that I've had some form of contact with 50 to 60 minors. And then he gets into graphic detail of the amount he's had full intimacy with, etc. I can't even say this, it's so gross. He says, I would classify 5 of those encounters as R-word, but the vast majority were in the gray area of consent. I suppose something that some readers may find interesting is that I have met several other predators who have similar preferences to mine. I suppose that many of you would be surprised about several things that I have learned in my interactions with other predators. First, about how many secret predators there are, how exceedingly common this preference is. And I'm not even going to read the second and third reason. And he says how easy it is to get away with it in a society that basically treats predators like witches. If anyone wants to ask me details, note, I will not stupidly reveal any identifying information, so don't bother trying to trick me into giving up my address. Then feel free to DM me, and I'd be happy to answer questions. And the OP's profile was shortly taken down after his post, but let's get into some of the top comments. Someone says, this is one of those things you hope is a troll. If it's then, OP needs to die in a fire. I can't even begin to describe how sociopathic this whole thing reads. I was never abused. I had other shit, but not intimately. My stuff messed me up enough as it was. I can't even imagine what this could have done to the victims. And a lot of the other comments are just people also saying they're predators, and I think it's other people actually confessing to being a predator. It's horrific. It's disgusting. And this is what I say in every single video I've included a predator confession. Like, there's so many predators out there. It's horrifying. Like, you guys truly need to be careful who you talk to on the internet, because you never know who they might be or what their intentions might be. And you just, if you're a parent or if you're a minor yourself, just be super careful about what your own kid is looking at on the internet, who they talking to, what websites are they using? Because, these people are everywhere, and it's disgusting. And that's why I usually like to include a predator confession, because then it just drives home the fact that there's so many out there, and you just need to be careful. Whether it's your little brother, little sister, your cousin, just please be checking on what they're doing online, because the internet is a dangerous place, and there is so many vile human beings on the internet. So yeah, just guys, stay safe, please. And all of these people need to rot in prison for the rest of their life. God, just beyond disgusting. Need advice on inheritance, arbitrage, family, etc. Please, I am becoming desperate. The Bitcoin boom has been wonderful for some people, obviously, but I am really struggling. Last year, my father passed away. My mother passed away from cancer many years ago. And my sister and I were left with a large inheritance. I am 23, and my sister is only 17. Parents had us when they were somewhat older. The inheritance was placed entirely in my control to be split between my sister and I. He did not want her to have access to the money until she turned 21. I am tasked with assisting her with college payments, etc. I chose to liquidate the majority of the assets and was left with around $750,000. I'm bitter about this because I was ripped off by a shifty individual taking advantage of my ignorance on some things. I should have gotten much more than I did. Well, I discovered Bitcoin a few years ago. I today greatly regret that the moment I liquidated the inheritance, I didn't place the entirety of it into Bitcoin. With Bitcoin on the verge of making it very, very big, I began performing arbitrage 6 months ago. The rising adoption has created volatility, which makes it very good for arbitrage. And for those of you who don't know what arbitrage is, it's basically just an investment or trading strategy for Bitcoin, or I guess stocks in general. But let's continue. I know of people that have made a lot of money doing this, but I have now lost a lot of money. I am consistently misjudging the movement of the markets. I buy in and sell, not holding any long-term positions. On the 19th, I bought 250 coins at $800. It was quickly rising, and I was worried I would not be able to buy in at that price ever again. Immediately after my purchase again, it began tanking. I tried to hold my position hoping it was just temporary and would return to $800 and increase from there. After hitting around $600, it began to increase again. I viewed this as reaffirming my projection. It rose again to around $700. I held my position into the 20th. It dropped to $500, and that was my sell point, hoping to minimize my losses. I lost $75,000 in an almost 24-hour period. This was my fastest and almost largest single trade loss. If I'd continued to hold, I would be able to sell right now with minimal losses. I have made money on trades, but overall the losses have kept me in the red. As of today, over the past 7 months, I have lost a total of $410,000. The inheritance was supposed to be split between my younger sister and I, giving us each $375,000 plus half of the house. Not worth much, rural area, etc. However, I don't have a legal obligation to provide her with half of the money. That was a verbal contract between my father and I. The in-writing legal stuff allocates it all to me. I made the mistake of telling her that I invested the money into Bitcoin. She has read the news, etc. on it, so she is under the assumption that there is a lot more money than there actually is. Regardless, I've already paid her first year of college tuition in cash anyway. This was around $30,000. I also bought her a used car to take to college, $5,000. We later found out they don't want freshmen to have cars, so we might sell it and I can give her that money. Ultimately, in addition to other living expenses, bills, car, etc., I have around $280,000 left, which is currently all liquid. Now, if you took the time to read all of that, thank you. I'm sorry it was so long. What I am looking for is advice on how to trade. How can I guarantee that I earn high returns? What are good resources on how to trade Bitcoin? Are there any good books? Blah, 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 blah. I'm not going to read the rest, but he's basically just asking for help. I know I can earn this money back. I just need to figure out how. Is there any experienced traders out there that is in need for funding? I'm willing to work out a deal where we can work together on this. I need to see a proven track record of success though. Thanks for your time. I know a lot of people are going to respond negatively to me. I know I fucked up. I really, really need advice though, so please don't downvote me just because I'm an idiot. And by the way, this post has 0 upvotes and a staggering 683 and 43 comments. And let's get into some of them. Someone says, the financial instrument is irrelevant here. You have a gambling problem and need a psychologist. And the OP says, I didn't and don't really consider what I am doing to be gambling. I am investing/day trading. It isn't like I spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on scratch-off tickets. I was just unlucky in some of my trades. I'm not looking for magic bullet advice. I'm looking for proven strategies that have been shown to work. I know there are no guarantees. I really need to make this money back though. I have decided that if I get down to $150,000 that I will stop. Oh no. So I basically have $130,000 left to invest. I know it won't come down to that though. By stopping there, my sister and I can split $75,000 and be able to survive for a while since we don't have any parental assistance any longer. That will help her pay for another 2 years of school. She'll only have to acquire a little bit of debt to finish then. And oh my God, the OP has lost nearly $500,000 and he doesn't think he's gambling. Oh my God, this is really tragic. The sister is losing all of her inheritance. And the poor parents that put all of their trust into the OP here to take care of him and his sister. And he just fucked it all up. And someone says, give the entire $280,000 to your sister. You were supposed to be the responsible one. And someone else says, the money is gone. Be a big boy, tell her what happened, and give her the rest. You made a deal with your dad. Now honor your end of the bargain as best as you can. And someone else says, man, I feel terrible for your sister. Please keep us updated as you piss away the rest of her inheritance. And someone else says, sorry to hear the loss of your parents at such a young age. You've been landed with heavy responsibilities and you are acknowledging you failed. I can't say I know much about trading, but it sounds like you have a gambling problem. Trading your way out does not sound like a good idea. You say, I know I can earn this money back, but you do not know that. You only hope it. You seem to acknowledge that it was your father's wish that your sister receive half the money. Can you really live with yourself if you go back on that? How much more of your sister's money will you risk before stopping? You have lost your part of the money, and some of hers too. By what you have said, it seems like you owe her $50,000 plus the remaining $280,000. If you want to be fair, I think you should own up to your sister. Let her decide what to do with it, where to invest it. She may be pretty pissed off with you, but you never really know what might happen. Your sister has lost her mother and her father. Do you really want her to lose her brother and her inheritance? Do the difficult thing, the fair thing. Talk to her. And many people say things such as, you are a scumbag or you effing piece of shit. And a lot of people really feel that way, and I can't blame them. I agree. This OP went against his father's word, and now his sister doesn't have her inheritance, and he doesn't have his inheritance either. He wasted it basically gambling. And from how the OP is responding in these comments, it doesn't really look like he was going to stop. This was the last official post on the OP's profile, and so we don't know what ended up happening. Although in a few other threads, I did see that people are speculating that he lost all the money and he only got $15,000 from the house. And so I don't know if that's verified. I don't know if that's true, but some people have said the OP came back on a different profile. I can't find it. And he posted that he lost everything, which how he's acting here in the comments, it doesn't seem that far off. The OP says, oh, he's confident he's going to make it back and he's going to make it all back. But, you know, he really is just gambling. I mean, he lost $500,000 in 7 months. That's horrifying. And that was supposed to pay for his sister's education. And more likely than not, he ripped apart the remaining relationship with his sister. I mean, imagine finding out that your brother lost your entire inheritance from your father because he basically gambled it away. That was supposed to pay for your education and to set you up for a good life. And also, I just find it insane in the first place that the OP felt the need to have to day trade with this money. Like, was $750,000 not enough money? Like, that's life-changing money for anybody. And for whatever reason, he decided that wasn't enough and he needed more. I mean, truly, the OP here is just a greedy dirtbag who lost his entire inheritance, or allegedly his entire inheritance, because that's what people were saying. But, I mean, he lost more than half of it, so it's just horrible. It really is horrible, and this is just super, super depressing because, yeah, like I said, from the other people speculating in threads, he lost all of it, and he sold the house for only $15,000 because he had to pay back some money, and he was left with basically nothing. I don't know if that's true, but like I said, I kind of believe it. And everybody in this post was saying, please give your money to your sister, or give the remaining inheritance to your sister, but I mean, it doesn't seem like he did. And yeah, this was a really depressing thread, and I'm sure he ripped apart the relationship with his sister. And I wonder where he is today. I was in prison for 7 years. I saw a man die there horribly. I was a really, really shitty person once upon a time. I was driving drunk at 22 and hit someone and killed them. I served 7 years for manslaughter. I'm not proud of it, and it's my greatest shame in my life. I try to just live each day a little bit better than before, and live in such a way that I make amends for the life I took. In prison, I tried to take advantage of a lot of the programs there. I learned how to be an electrician, but it wasn't a great place. I was in Max for the first 2, but I got moved there due to good behavior. That maximum security prison was the most terrifying place I've ever been. Most of the guys are serving 10+ year sentences for super violent shit and know they're gonna die there, so they got nothing to lose. I was put there because I killed someone, and the minimum security prison was full at the time. I survived by just keeping my head down and minding my own business. If I saw something going down, I kept my mouth shut. I managed to get assigned to laundry duty, which was one of the best jobs. I was carrying a full load of dirty shit one day, about a year in, when I came into the laundry room and saw a group of guys holding a guy down and stabbing them over and over. Unfortunately, they heard me and their leader turned to me and looked at me while holding the knife in his hand. He calmly said, "What do you see here?" I looked around and said, "Nothing but laundry." He walked right up to me, looked me dead in the eye and said, "You see anything else?" I said, "No, sir. Nothing at all." He nodded and said, "You should go then." I turned on my heel and walked out while that dude was lying there bleeding out and gurgling. Obviously, the guards asked me about it since I was working, and that guy was found dead in my work area just outside the camera range. I told them I didn't see anything. They offered to make petitions to get me time off my sentence or even get me out of Max. I didn't budge. I told them I didn't see nothing or know nothing. I knew that they wouldn't move me soon enough, and if I was found out as a rat, they'd probably do worse to me. They were pissed because they knew I had to know something, but thankfully, they didn't punish me. Thankfully, I got transferred to minimum security the next year due to good behavior, and Max was getting crowded. Things were a lot more chill there, but I never told anyone about what I saw that day. Eventually, I got out and got a job and started getting my life back on track again. I'm doing better now, but that shit is definitely still with me, but I'm more haunted by the man I killed. I joined AA and go every week, and just got my 5-year chip, and I've been seeing a counselor a lot. I don't think I can ever make amends, but I'm trying to put good out there now. I am a convicted predator, and this is what I want the public to understand. A common misconception about predators is that they are all heartless, violent R-wordists. If there was an organization that could send public messages anonymously to try and raise awareness about the truth about many predators, what would you like to say from a personal perspective? Here's what I would like to say. I'm a predator, but I didn't ask to be this way. I just am. I don't have a cold heart, and I'm not motivated to intentionally cause any harm to anyone. I am as nice and empathetic as anyone, but sometimes get strong desires to do bad things. Due to the judgment, hate, and misconceptions about all of us, I feel very isolated in this world and that nobody can help and support me. This makes me feel very depressed and more likely to get into worse situations. If I were not so discriminated, I might feel more motivated to deal with my problems as best as I can. Sadly, there is not enough help for us kind of people, or anywhere near enough research into this kind of problem. If there was safe help, even for people without convictions, much like there is for those with drug addictions, I feel this kind of problem could be made better for many. Although, let's get into some of the top comments. Someone says, "You say you don't have a cold heart or intentionally want to hurt anyone, yet you've acted on these urges. While you may truly believe your own bullshit, you know exactly what this does to young minors emotionally, mentally, and physically. This would be different and easier to believe had you not acted on your urges, but you did, and as the victim of a predator, I would just like to say, fuck you." And someone else says, "You idiot, you are convicted. That says you did horrible things. Go rot in hell, MFer." Killed someone, told nobody. Throwaway account for obvious reasons, and I'm pretty drunk right now, so please take that into account. Luckily, there is an autocorrect on the Reddit website, so I won't look like a total idiot, except for what I'm about to describe. I've actually told 2 people what has happened. The first person was a pastor from a church I don't frequently go to, and the other was a chaplain who does reach outs to civilians from one of the military facilities I work near. Not going to mention which. But I've never actually told this to anyone else, and I feel empty and want outside input. Not just someone who will tell me everything is going to be okay, and that I was acting in self-preservation, blah, 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 blah. I want obvious input, and so I kind of want to reach out here for some of that. This happened a few months back, and if you look into the police reports, I don't even know how you do that. You'll have, hopefully, a hard time figuring out when and who it was. I went out one of the mornings I was off work to grab some beer from the local brewery. They make amazing amber lagers, and I was having a good time of it that day. It was around 10:30 a.m., and when I left, I saw this weird dude talking on his cell phone in the Jeep, looking at me like I didn't have pants on or something. Anyways, I left and thought it was weird. I get back to my apartment complex like 20 minutes later, beer in tow, and this guy was at my front door. He didn't seem to be paying attention to me, and as I approached, I could see he was trying to break in. He had this metal shank looking thing and was punching my doorknob with it. Anyways, whatever he was doing was not normal, and I freaked out. I walked up and grabbed him by his shirt collar and pulled him hard from the door because I literally did not know what else to do. I should have called the cops, I know, and I look back on that situation now thinking about what I could have done differently almost every day it seems. My door is 2 stairs up from the concrete walkway, and when I pulled him, he lost his balance and I basically ended up throwing him to the ground. His head hit the concrete and he fell unconscious. Or at the time, what I thought was unconscious at least. I freaked out and went inside. I sat in my chair in the living room, freaking out about what happened. I didn't really know what was going on, and for some reason, I kept thinking about how weird it was my beer was on the ground outside and was gonna get warm. I have no idea why that was my main focus, but it kept coming back to my mind over and over and over again. Anyways, about a half later, I went outside my door, and since nobody else was around, I grabbed my beer and drove away to escape the situation. I honestly thought that guy would wake up and leave, and it would never be an issue. When I drove away, I could see there was some blood on the ground, but I didn't look too closely. He was still laying there, though. I came back several hours later, and when he was still there, I called the police. They sent out an ambulance and like 4 cops showed up. I gave them a report, and someone, I don't remember who, I wasn't paying attention, took the body away. To this day, I don't know how to feel about it. I can't help but feeling like I'm a monster for not telling people, but I was also trying to protect myself and my wife. I've not even told her about it, and she was in the basement the whole time playing games or something. What should I do? Who do I talk to about this? Should I turn myself in? Is it already too late? And let's get into the top comments. Someone says, he obviously had intent to do harm. You're in no fault, dude. Don't beat yourself up about it. You didn't have the intention of killing him. He brought it upon himself. And the OP replies and says, I appreciate the sentiments and I understand rationally, but it doesn't make me feel that much better, to be honest. And someone else says, turn yourself in. The only reason that would make sense is if you lied to the police initially, because they would have already charged you with murder, or at the very least manslaughter. If you told them the truth and they haven't charged you, you're legally in the clear. I'm 24 and facing life in prison. It has been almost 9 months now since I got arrested on the charge I'm currently out on $1 million bond for. On February 28th, I was charged with first-degree assault, burglary, kidnapping, all Class A felonies, 2 counts of armed criminal action, unclassified 3 to 99 years, and unlawful possession of a firearm, Class C. I am a twice convicted felon, so all of my felonies were enhanced. In Missouri, we have what's called prior and persistent offenders, our version of the 3 strikes law. On the 30th of April, I found a bondsman who would take 40 grand, or 4% of my bond, though I was actually initially released on just 1.5%, or $15,000. I've been on 24/7 house arrest since then, with my next court date being in January. No sign of when this will be wrapped up yet, and to be honest, I kind of like it that way. They have me totally locked down, and I can't even work. The only case in which I can leave the house are either medical or to see my lawyer, which with the pandemic going on, obviously I can't really take up either of those options either. I'm not complaining at all. Not mad at the system, not feeling the least bit vindictive for that matter. I've had plenty of time to make peace with myself and those close to me. Honestly, I'm just bored. Lonely. I don't really have any friends anymore. Everyone I associated with was a lowlife and I can't do it anymore. I am 9 months clean and turned 24 on the 13th of this month. If anybody has any questions or advice for me, it would mean a lot. It would be nice to be able to get some of this off my chest. Thank you in advance for your interest if you care to engage. Hit me with anything. I've heard it all. I can take criticism. And let's get into the top comments. Someone says, so what's the story? And the OP says, I'm accused of firing rounds at an individual in an attempted armed robbery/burglary. There were 2 other people involved. Let's just say, it didn't go like they're saying. I don't really even remember the day all too well. I know I was far too drunk to do what they're saying I did. Hell, I was asleep when the cops ran in my car and arrested me, pulled me out, and beat the shit out of me. Another user says, I would just find a way to leave the country and start a new life somewhere. Find somewhere remote and take on a new identity and call it a life. And the OP responds and says, I could. I honestly really could. The problem is, for one, I'm broke. And also, you gotta understand, we're talking about a $1 million bond here. I may have paid the bondsman to personally get me out of jail, but if I run and flee, my cosigner has to pay the $1 million. It's tempting, but ultimately, I couldn't do that to my mom and dad. And also, I want to spend as much time with them as possible. My grandma as well. She's 90 and is sick. But thankfully, she's beating it like a champ. This moment of lockdown is a time to reflect and try to establish myself as a respectable individual too. And someone else says, if you did what you're charged with plus prior felonies, to be honest, you deserve it. If you didn't, then I'd do whatever I can to get out of the country if I were convicted, but still had to go to the prison myself. Anything is better than life in US prison. And the OP responds and says, it's hard to get across to people how much charges change and how they are always trumped up at the beginning. They grasp for straws. You know what the kidnapping was? My female codependent on this case told the police that I was planning on tying the victims up in the closet. Literally hearsay. And no one was kidnapped. It wasn't even talked about. In fact, I didn't even know where I was. I was so drunk and effed up, I to this day can't identify the faces of any of the victims. I believe that's because I never even saw a thing. Occam's razor tells me I was asleep, considering I was completely uncoordinated. The kid with me was driving the car and holding onto my grandpa's pistol, the one used in the shooting. The shooting, by the way, the assault charge, somebody fired 3 rounds into the bottom of the glass door, apparently because he said they owed him money. Silly. The bullets were from a .25 and didn't even penetrate through the second layer of glass. No excuse for my behavior. Nobody was hurt, thank God. Does that excuse me being there? Having a weapon of my family's in the car, not for robberies? No, absolutely not. I should have been at home, resting, not accompanying someone to some shit I wasn't even aware of. Stupid. Plus, those kids were terrorized, possibly traumatized. That is something I will have to live with for the rest of my life, whether I did anything or not. Thank you for the comment. God bless. And someone else says, I've been arrested and gone to prison. They will charge you with everything you did, but only convict you of a couple charges if you take the plea deal. Previous felony convictions don't give you enhancements. Now, if they were for the same charges or you went to prison, you were already convicted of them, yeah, you get the enhancement if you went to prison. But since you had a firearm as a felon, then you will do a minimum of 10 years, and they will most likely be giving you at least 1 strike since there was an assault and kidnapping, since you had the gun during the crimes. Gun charge will most likely stand, and so will the kidnapping and assault. They may or may not drop the armed criminal action and burglary. If a strike, you will get at least 20 years at 85%, first strike, then 90% second strike, and 100% third strike with a minimum of 25 to life. It all demands on your past and how bad the crimes were. But from my experience, there will be at least a sentence of 20 years if no strike. You will serve 5 if you keep your good time credits. If you run, you will get the maximum plus of 5 years. And it seems like the OP, what he said in his previous post about a lot of them won't stick, reigned true, because he kept posting on and off the next few years, although it didn't look so hot. He made a few posts about talking about drugs and saying how he was struggling with drug addiction, and one of his last posts on his profile says, I just tried C drug for the first time, and wow. And I'm just going to read the first sentence, but it says, so following a 6-day long binge of crystal and highly pure booger sugar, I somehow found myself with a C head in my car. And he gets into it but it looks like he's gone downhill ever since this post of him facing life in prison. And so what I assume happened is the charges he was charged with just didn't stick because, like he said, he didn't probably do anything. He was just with someone. And so most likely he got just dropped and he didn't have any sort of criminal charges against him. But it looks like he spiraled and got into drug addiction. And like I just read, was doing hard drugs. And he hasn't posted in over a year, almost 2 years. And so who knows where the OP is, but man, that was a bad spiral. And his Reddit description even says, I don't really exist anymore, or I'm not supposed to. If I do, I'll be hunted down. And so I go back and forth between the here and now and the hereafter. It's much nicer on the other side. So who knows what that means? Does that mean he's on the run maybe? I don't know, because he says, no one knows I exist anymore. And if they do, I'll be hunted down. And so maybe he's on the run, or who knows? But very strange spiral. What do you guys think? My best friend OD'd, and I can't help but feel responsible. I'm not sure if this is the right place for this, but the mods can remove it if it's not. I'm 25 male, and my best friend OD'd about 6 months ago. He was only 24. I'll call him Leo. He was hooked on booger sugar, weed, and all other kinds of pills. One of them was some weird Russian cosmonaut drug he said they gave to astronauts. Crazy stuff. He bought everything on the dark web and was seriously good with computers. He was such a smart, funny, and amazing guy. I always wished he'd put that brain to better use. Leo had always struggled with addiction, just like his dad. He told us his dad was a deadbeat addict who had died years ago. He never went into much detail, and I never pushed him. I figured that's where his addictive side came from. We started experimenting really young, around mid-teenage years, with all sorts of pills, weed, and booger sugar. It screwed up a lot of us. I still fight with my K addiction now and then. Leo's main thing was booger sugar though. He'd do massive amounts, stay up for days, get into crazy debt, and get super paranoid. At one point, he owed 1,200 euros to some guy who had just got out of prison. He moved away for a while to try and get clean. For 2 or 3 years, nobody heard from him. When he came back to our hometown, he seemed sober. He was running, seeing a counselor, and actually looked happy. He'd been diagnosed with schizophrenia, but it was under control at the time. It felt like I had my best friend back. We'd game together like old times and talk conspiracy theories all night long. If Leo called you at 1 a.m., you knew you were in for a long one. After a few months, he started using again. Just small amounts while gaming at first. I warned him, but he said it wouldn't be a problem, and I believed him. Then he started taking sleeping tablets to come down after booger sugar binges. It went from a few grams to a lot of grams. He was funding it by gambling his benefits and by buying extra booger sugar to sell so he could use the profit himself. Things got really bad. He had a hole in his nose you could put a finger through, constant nosebleeds, and he was popping loads of pills. His daily routine was brutal. Wake up around 5 p.m., do a ton of booger sugar, sell through the night, take all of his pills around 4 or 5 a.m., smoke some weed, and pass out. He was still living with his mom, and she kept telling him to stop. We all did. I wish I'd done more to help. The weekend it happened, some stuff went down that still feels off to me. He got robbed at his back door by someone he thought he could trust. That destroyed him. and he went on a massive booger sugar binge. I was texting and calling him nonstop. I loved him like a brother. Then he went quiet. His mom had said she was getting his uncle from Ireland to come take him away and sort his head out. I told him it might be a good idea, but he didn't want to hear it. The night before the uncle was supposed to show up, Leo stopped answering his phone. A couple days later, we heard there'd been a police car at his mom's house. Some friends went round to knock on the door and ask what was going on. His mom opened it and just said, "He's dead," before slamming the door in our faces. He'd done his usual routine, taken his sleeping pills after the booger sugar, gone into the kitchen to roll a joint, and OD'd right there on the floor. Legs crossed, weed half rolled in his hands. His mom found him like that the next morning. I knew exactly what he was taking and how dangerous it was. I stood by and didn't do enough. Now he's gone. Later, we found out the uncle was actually his dad, the one he'd said was dead all those years. He must have really hated him. That question still eats at me. Did Leo do it on purpose because his dad was coming to take him away? He was smart. He knew all the dosages inside out. He'd even told me the lethal amounts to try and reassure me when I worried. I'll probably never know if it was an accident or if he chose to go. Maybe that's for the best. A month before he died, my girlfriend and I had split up. I still loved her. Leo told me he'd help me get her back. After he passed, she saw the fundraiser for his funeral and reached out. We're back together now. In a weird way, he kept his promise. But I'll always feel like I let him down. Rest in peace, brother. See you on the other side. I robbed a man of $15,000 and don't feel bad about it at all. Okay, it all starts about 5 years ago as I worked as a cashier at a gas station. Every day, about 4 p.m., a certain construction worker would come in and flirt with me. Even after several days of me telling him I don't feel comfortable with him doing that, after his persistent flirting, he proceeds to buy lottery tickets. Today, he bought a ticket and won the exact amount of money he bought the original ticket for back. He tells me to buy another card with that money, and out of nowhere, the dude won $15,000. At the time, I was shocked, but I kept a straight face. I then told him the card wasn't worth anything, and he never questioned me as he left the store. He won't ever know, but I hope this is karma to him for being a douche. I still have the ticket, and I'm not sure what to do with it. And now let's get into some of the top comments. Someone says, "You're a shitty person. If you actually think you can justify stealing $15,000 of a dude who wouldn't stop flirting with you. If this dude comes back regularly, give him his damn ticket." And someone else says, "You're a loser, and I wish the worst for you." And someone else says, "I seriously hope you don't plan to cash it in. Not only is what you did wrong, and in no way karma for someone being pushy and rude in their flirtations, but you realize this sub has over 1 million subscribers, right? Not to mention people that come here by chance aren't subs. What you did was illegal, and you already run a risk of being caught, even before you confess to what you did online in a public forum. If someone was motivated, they could easily trace this back to you. Whether you apologize to him and give it back and hope to God he forgives you and doesn't try and press charges is your prerogative. But please don't try and benefit from this monetarily when what you've done is theft. Wife of 15 years admitted to cheating. I am dead inside. My wife and I have been together for 15 years. She recently admitted to cheating on me. It was early in the relationship, maybe around the first year. We were in a rough patch. It was bad for a few weeks, but eventually we made up and everything was fine again. We spent the next 15 years building a life together. During that time, we both went back to school and received 2 degrees, 4 total between us. We moved in together. We got engaged. We got married. We bought a house. We had kids. And then one day she calls me into the room. She's sitting on the couch. She's crying. I don't know why. She tells me, totally out of the blue, that she cheated on me. It was during that rough patch in the first year. She just couldn't hold it in anymore. She wanted there to be no secrets between us. I wasn't mad. That was a little strange. I thought I should feel outraged. I figured it was because I loved her so much. Love conquers all, so I thought that I forgave her. I did feel a strange, subtle sensation. I didn't understand it at the time, so I ignored it. As the days and months went on, I started to lose interest in things that I enjoyed. I stopped doing projects around the house. I didn't talk much to my wife. I was just kind of going through the motions. It gets a tiny bit worse every single day, almost imperceptibly so. Now I understand what that feeling was. That weird, subtle twinge deep inside me. It was my heart breaking. I am hopelessly depressed. My marriage is a sham, and my life is a lie. I've spent my entire adult life pouring everything I had into this relationship, only to find out that she poisoned it way back at the starting line. I don't want much out of life. My parents split up when I was very little because one of them cheated, and I had a terrible childhood because of it. My goal in life, ever since I was a teenager, was to rebuild the life that was taken away from me so that one day I could give it to my eventual children. And I had done it. I married the woman that I loved. We lived in a nice house in a good school district, and we had healthy, happy kids. Most people go through life without ever realizing their dreams. I achieved mine before I was 30. And now the dream is a nightmare. That home is a prison. I get up every morning and convince myself to live the life for one more day. I don't know what to do. Edit. Wow. I really didn't expect so much feedback. Thanks to all who have taken the time to respond. Even the trolls. Some of this stuff made me laugh. I still don't know what we're gonna do. There is a lot of different advice here, and that has given me a lot of perspective. I think that's what I need the most right now. If nothing else, you guys have given me some new ways to think about this, so thank you to everyone who has given me legitimate support no matter which side you fall on. I guess there is also some confusion about the timeline. If anyone is interested, the wedding and the starts of our family were both before age 30. I am pushing 40 now.